today. Vice Chair Freeman,
Here.
Vice Chair Herrera,
Here.
Commissioner McNulty,
Here.
Commissioner Sturts.
Here.
We have a quorum. And other folks at the table on my left, Joe Canefield and Mary O'Grady are legal counsel for us. Willie Desmond and Kenneth Strasma from Strategic Telemetry. We have a court reporter, Michelle, taking a record today, so be sure to, if you do address us during public comment, be sure to speak directly into the microphone and spell your name for the record so that we get an accurate accounting. Buck Forrest is our Chief Technology Officer. We are streaming today. I don't know if we have other, Lisa Schnelling, I know, or no, Christy Olson is here today, a public outreach coordinator. I think you saw her on the way in, and then I know Ray Bladine, our Executive Director, and Christina Gomez, our Deputy Executive Director, will be here shortly. So I think that concludes all the folks. With that, our first item on the agenda is map presentations, and this is a recurring agenda item for us at this phase, and it's for folks who want to present any maps that they may have created themselves or as part of a coalition, so that we get that input into the record. And I don't have any requests to speak in front of me on that matter, so I'm not sure. Is there anybody in the public, if you want to raise your hand, that has a map that they wanted to present today? Right. This is for the past few weeks now, we've been having this on our agenda, and it'll continue. There'll be definitely many opportunities to do this in the future. It's going to be on our agenda every single time. So it's fine if there's nobody that wanted to present maps today to us. You'll have more opportunities to do so. We had some additional items on our agenda from yesterday, and I'm wondering if Mr. Herrera, do you have a copy of that agenda on you, or does anyone? We ended up having to table a number of items from yesterday's meeting, and so I thought we'd look at those and maybe work those in first.
Madam Chair, and it does
Yes.
need to be on today's agenda if we're going to talk about it today. So if it's not on today's agenda, we shouldn't talk about it today, and we'll need to place it on a future agenda.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand that.
Because the idea of the agenda is to make sure that everyone has notice of what's going to be discussed today, and so so if we're going to discuss something today, it has to be on today's agenda. The fact that it was tabled at yesterday's meeting doesn't necessarily give the public notice that it's going to be discussed today here. And so, because not everyone's necessarily privy to the fact that it was tabled yesterday. So it just needs to go on a future agenda.
Okay, so the items from yesterday cannot be covered?
Unless they're on today's agenda.
Okay.
Okay, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Herrera?
And for a future or for a recurring agenda item, can we add tabled agendas to be included? Is that possible?
No, you'd need to be more specific than that, because again, the idea of the agenda is to give the public notice, and so they need to have the specific notice about what substantively is going to be discussed.
Okay. Well, I guess that makes it kind of easy then. I guess we're only going to cover the items that are on today's agenda. So that takes us to item 3, discussion with mapping consultant and legal counsel and possible action regarding prison inmate population and appropriate methodology to use in mapping. And we kind of had a discussion on this yesterday. I don't know if our mapping consultant has prepared something.
Madam Chair, we have nothing to add.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I think what we came up with yesterday, and I'm going to summarize it, I think we will include the prison population that we've been doing with the, when we're doing the total population, or equal population count. But when we're doing the voter strength, or for example, HVAP, that the prison population will not be counted towards the HVAP. I think that's what we decided, or what we agreed on, or what we said. We will agree on that. Is that correct?
That's my recollection.
Madam Chair, that's, from what I heard yesterday, that's what I took away from it. Correct.
Through Skype. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Herrera.
The issue was regarding the item number 3, discussion with mapping consultant and legal counsel and possible action regarding prison inmate population and appropriate methodology to use in mapping. What we decided yesterday was to keep using the prison population with the total population count when we're doing the equal population among the 30 legislative and 9 congressional districts, but when we are doing HVAP, the Hispanic voting age population, that they will not be included in the HVAP factor.
Okay, any comments on that from other commissioners? Okay. We'll move to agenda item 4, review, discussion, and direction to mapping consultant regarding ideas for possible adjustments to congressional grid map based on constitutional criteria. So we talked about congressional grid maps, what-if scenarios a bunch yesterday, and gave our mapping consultant some directions to make some changes. And I will turn it over to them, and they can tell us how far they got.
And of course, Mr. Desmond's computer chose this moment to crash. He's rebooting. If there are any general or conceptual things we want to discuss while Willie gets the computer back, otherwise it will just be a minute.
Ms. McNulty?
There it is. We had talked a couple weeks ago about comparing the majority-minority districts that we had drawn into our grid map with the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government maps. And I'm thinking that we still need to do that, and that it might be a useful exercise not to do it right now, but to do it with the help of counsel and perhaps look at the racially polarized voting analysis and the Hispanic electoral composition with regard to both of those, just so that we again get more familiar with the concepts and can see what the similarities and differences are in each of those different configurations, just as a way more than anything else to give us tools that we can use both on those maps and on the legislative district maps as we work on those. So maybe that's something that you could work on, not really as a what if, but as a presentation and a discussion for an agenda item next week.
Certainly, Commissioner, we can prepare that comparison and drilling down not only into the racial composition, but the voting behavior in those districts.
Okay.
Would be a valuable exercise. We'll
I
prepare
think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Not necessarily Monday, but
Oh, that's fine.
some point next week.
Any other questions or comments while we await the computer? Mr. Herrera?
Is there any other item that we can discuss while they're trying to?
Well, one, Mr. Strasma, would we be able to discuss the online Maptitude program, which is agenda item 6?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had an agenda item for training on the online Maptitude program. That's been moved and put on Monday's agenda. We wanted to make sure that the electoral data was up and running in the online software so that the same data that the commissioners have is available to the public. I was informed as we're driving down here that that is now up and working. So although we won't be having a presentation on it today, because that will be happening Monday, the site is up and working. By the end of this meeting, there'll be a link on the Commission's website to where you can go for online mapping software. The URL, if anyone wants it now, is azredistrictingmaps.org/redist, R-E-D-I-S-T. And that is the online version of the Maptitude software. Mr. Desmond will be presenting a brief training on that on Monday, and we're planning a webinar later on for people who aren't able to attend that training.
Great. Can you repeat the URL?
Certainly. It's www.azredistrictingmaps.org/redist. azredistrictingmaps, all one word, .org/redist, R-E-D-I-S-T. / thank you. And I realize that's a long URL. It will be, very shortly after this meeting, it will be linked directly from the ARC website. Things a little easier to get at.
Okay.
Mr. Strassman, will that webinar be something that people can log into at any time?
Yes, it will. We anticipate presenting it live and then having an archived version that people can watch at their convenience.
And Madam Chair,
Mr.
Mr. Strasman, will that online Maptitude program have the same degree of sophistication as the program that all the commissioners are equipped with, or will it be simplified in some respect?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Freeman, it is simplified in some respects. It has most of the functionality of the desktop Maptitude software, and as I mentioned before, we are endeavoring to have the same data sets available that are available to the commissioners. There is some functionality, some reporting that is available on the desktop that just isn't on the web version. Okay, Mr. Desmond's ready if there are no other questions on the.
Any other questions on the online software? Okay, thank you. So we'll jump back to item 4. This will be congressional grid map discussion.
Okay. So we have two more grid maps, what-if scenarios for congressional today. The first of which is the whole counties version 4B, which Mr. Freeman had emailed about this past weekend.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wonder if it makes sense just for 2 minutes to explain to people what these what-if grid maps are, what we're doing here.
Sorry about that. The what-if maps are adjustments to the initial grid map that the different commissioners have asked for, just to explore different possibilities of how the maps could look. They, most cases, do not meet all of the, actually no cases do they meet all of the criteria. They're conceptual, just snapshots, trying to explore different possibilities. They're informative for the commissioners as they kind of begin to develop what type of first draft map they want to make. So it allows them to explore different possibilities and then evaluate them before making decisions on a final direction they want to move in.
And they're based on feedback that we received during that first round of public hearings that we had around the state, where various people came and shared with us what was important to them on certain things. And so some of that is incorporated into what these what-if scenarios are based on.
So we're just starting the TriCaster so that the people watching on the live stream can follow along. Okay, so again, the first one we'll be discussing today, I guess, is whole counties version 4B. This is a map that Commissioner Freeman had requested with some changes, more so dealing with the outlying areas, not so much Maricopa County. I guess I'll just open it up and I'm going to take a look at it. And Buck, are you seeing the TriCaster? Okay. I don't believe so. County version 4B. I'm sorry. The reason that it's not available yet is because we haven't been able to print for the public until it's been presented to the commission. So it will be available on the website today. It might be there already because it's a duplicate from yesterday, but it's not available in the back of the room. So, Commissioner Freeman, is there anything you wanted to explore right away with this one, or?
Madam Chair? Yes. Would you, Mr. Desmond, zoom in on where proposed District 1 abuts proposed District 5?
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like what I'm seeing there is there's a portion of Maricopa County that has been included in proposed District 1, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Right.
And just generally, the idea with developing this what-if scenario was to start with the proposition based on constitutional criteria that we try to develop a map that respects county lines. That is, it splits as few counties as possible. Then overlaid upon that are the districts that the commission needs to create to respect, to comply with the Voting Rights Act. And then overlaid on a part of that, and also an overlay on that, is to not split reservation land with tribal land. So now we're on version 4B of this map. So that's correct. Then Maricopa County is
Yes.
treated there.
So this, if you can see my mouse, or if there's a laser pointer I can borrow, this little bit of Maricopa County is included in proposed congressional district number 1.
And then it also looks like in proposed congressional district 1, we've split a couple of reservations there. I don't know if that's the Gilas or the Ak-Chen's land. Is that also correct?
So this is the Ak-Chen, and then the Gila is above.
Okay, and they haven't been. Okay, would you mind zooming out? Here's what I would request on a further iteration of this map. If you could change the line that we first identified where Maricopa County has intruded into proposed District 1 and back that to the county line, so it follows sort of the game plan with this what-if scenario.
Okay.
And then if you could take proposed District 1 and capture the remainder of Pima County except for the Tohono O'odham tribal area that crosses into Pima County, and then also take the Gila Reservation and the Ak-Chen and put it into proposed Congressional District 3. And it might be the case that there's a population disparity there in proposed District 1 that perhaps, I know you haven't been trying to drill down to the exact one-person criteria. We're within a certain margin of error, but it might be that we're overpopulated in the one, but for purposes of this next iteration, we'll deal with that perhaps on a subsequent iteration. Then I'm not sure, but proposed District 3, if it's still short in population, if you could look to the area of the West Valley of Phoenix, perhaps in the area of what is currently proposed District 8, I believe. And perhaps starting on the western edge of that proposed district, working your way in if you need that population to balance, considering also voting rights concerns that we need to make sure that we're getting close to the baseline there. And then if you could zoom out. I mean, Maricopa County is going to have to be split multiple ways. There's just too much population there. I was seeing if we could get different approaches to sort of surrounding Maricopa County and respect county lines in that respect. So for purposes of the next iteration, which I think will probably be whole county's version 5B, we'll just keep the B designation. If you could de-designate the district, we'll leave District 7 because it's a minority majority district, but just de-designate 8, 9, 5, and 6 because I'm more interested in the surrounding districts for version 5B.
Okay.
And then if you could, let's do a version 5C as well. And just take version 5B and take a crack at dividing up the urban area of Maricopa County, focusing on compactness and respect for municipal city boundaries. And I want to keep them separate because it might be the case that we need to tweak and reiterate again 5B, and so we'll discard 5C. Because the urban area of Maricopa County is in and of itself, I mean, when you also factor in proposed District 7, a fairly compact area. So there's certainly various ways that it could be divided up, and we would want to look at competitiveness, we'd want to look at compactness, and municipal boundaries, and of course communities of interest as we do that. But
Okay.
if we could develop those two maps, I would appreciate it.
That'd be great. Are there other questions about this map? Or if possible, for this particular map, we were working on a new report that we're trying to put together. It's not run in Maptitude. It's a program that we're writing separately. And it might not be perfect yet. We're working on the car down here, but it's a splits report, attempting to show where split congressional split counties and census place and other areas are. If it's all right, I'd like to bring that up so you could just see that as an example for this one, and you could maybe suggest changes that you'd like us to, as we work to finalize it. So this is just a draft. I want to emphasize that it is. All right, so it shows the number of counties that are, yes. A little easier to see. Okay, so it shows the number of counties that are unsplit, split into 2 districts, and split into 3 or more. So in this case, the 9 unsplit counties are, some of the more rural counties. Most of the 2 split districts are split to accommodate tribal lands. And then the 3 or more is Maricopa, and will always be split into 3 or more. Then you have the same number by census place, by census tract, census block group, reservation, and we also have tribal subdivision. We haven't been looking too much at tribal subdivision, but that's the area inside the reservation that's identified on the census block file. And there's also the counties that are split. It gives you the number of districts it's split into. So, for instance, if we look back at the
And before we lose that point, could you explain a little more the significance of the data for the tribal subdivision number?
Yeah, and actually I'll let Ken, if you want to explain that.
Sure. Tribal subdivision is just, as the name suggests, a subdivision within reservations. We've been attempting to keep entire reservations unsplit, but for example, the Navajo Nation has, I believe, 20 or 30 tribal subdivisions within it, and it's just a unit of census geography within it.
So if you look here, you can see that Maricopa is split into 8 districts, obviously. Yuma is split into 2 districts. Pinal is split into 2 districts, etc. And we have the split census places. So this is the area that the census place, and you can see which ones of these are split and how many districts they're split into. Then again, for the split reservations and split tribal subdivisions. So we'll continue we'll start providing this for all these what-if scenarios, but we'd also be interested in any feedback you had on other things that might be useful. We can let you know if it's doable or not, and just let us know what would be helpful for you to have.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
For the mapping team, there's probably a couple of other cells. And again, the For the purposes of those folks that are watching, the criteria that we are to craft the maps on are based on the constitutional language that was provided to us through the state of Arizona under Proposition 106. There are 6 criteria that it's designed into. The first is meeting the criteria of the Voters' Rights Act, and the second having all of the congressional districts having, and I'll speak only on congressional districts, having equal population. So when Commissioner Freeman was just speaking about population sets being plus or minus a certain number, we are really looking at this from a macro point of view. And I believe, and I'm not trying to paraphrase the chair's discussion, when we did our original tour of the state, we found some really general macro ideas. And those general macro ideas are what we're trying to bring forward in these 3 conceptual map styles that you're looking at. One has been sort of named the River District, one has been named the 3 Border District, and one has been named the County District. Now, because that was sort of a continuing trend. So with the data that we're now starting to drill down from the macro to the micro, we have to look at things that are required of us as design criteria as part of the constitutional requirements. One of them is that the districts become geographically compact and contiguous. Now, what that means is that there's several different styles of ways of looking at compactness. So as this goes forward, you're going to see us looking at those to see how that criteria works. And we'll be asking the consultants about the Polsby-Popper test, the perimeter test, and the REAC test, which are 3 different styles that measure compactness. Another is to the extent practical where districts respect visible geographic features, cities, towns, municipalities, and county boundaries. So we're sort of working from that data. So as we're also looking at this, so one of the reasons why we asked yesterday to start to develop this data is that it's going to give us an easy way to count whether or not we're meeting some of the core criteria in the constitutional requirements, sort of working from the outside in. So a couple of things that we would want to add too is population density as it pertains to, for example, how much of in a particular district is that may be touching into another district. For example, you've got a district that touches into Maricopa County. How much of that overall percentage of population is based in the touch point rather than the rural? To try to give an understanding of where the population centers are and how they affect the rest of the district would be a way, and I think that there's probably some subs down from that. I just wanted to, Madam Chair, thank you for indulging on sort of like the overview. We've got a lot of folks that didn't hear what we were talking about yesterday.
Yep, no, that's helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
And I think you guys were gonna work on some kind of population density map for the state too, right, overall?
That's
separate?
That's finished.
Oh, it's done.
It was hanging up at yesterday's meeting, and we'll work to getting that on the website very shortly. It's a very large JPEG image file, so that people doing it at home can really zoom in and the Maricopa and the Pima areas and see where the population lies. I could open that up briefly if you'd like to see it.
Sure, because since I didn't see it on the wall yesterday, it'd be great. Yeah, do you have it here by chance?
I do not. I'm
Oh.
sorry. I believe I actually left it there yesterday on accident. So we'll print up another one, and it'll also be on. So here's the map. This is done by census block group. So the gray areas are parts of the state where there is absolutely no population. If it was done by census block, those areas would expand because the block group covers a larger area. Just one person living there would automatically shade it.
Could you elaborate on what a census block group is?
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. So census geography, for the purposes of organization, is broken down into several layers of geography that all nest within each other. These are not municipal boundaries or things that come from the state. These are purely tabulation areas. So a block is the most granular, the smallest level of census geography. Blocks then are grouped together to comprise census block groups. No block can be in two block groups. They're wholly contained in a block group. Those census block groups are then grouped together to form census tracts. And again, no block group can be split among two tracts. They all fit perfectly into the tracts. The tracts are then grouped together to form counties, and then counties are grouped together to form whole states. So this is presented at the block group level. Normally, for the purposes of us looking at things, I've been using track. It's slightly larger, but for this I did block group because I thought people might find it useful to drill down. I will zoom in right now and show you the key, so you have a sense of what these. So, if you want to try to keep that in mind, I know this isn't the best way of looking at this, but just for the purposes right now. So as you would have suspected, most of the dense population is in Maricopa County and then also Pima County. If we look at the Maricopa and Pima zoom-ins, you're able to see exactly some of the areas. The red dashed line is the census place. So my computer is acting up today. Just bear with me for 1 second. So these red dashed lines are the census place. So for instance, this is Paradise Valley. If you go zoom in all the way, it lets you get pretty close. So people looking at this online or downloading it will be able to look at the density in different places. It also does have some of the major interstates and roads on it to kind of provide reference points.
Mr. Desmond, is the entire state divided up into census places?
No. So that's a good point. Census places are areas that kind of represent towns in different municipalities. Ken, do you have anything you wanted to say on that, or?
Would you, while you're explaining that, let's go down to Tucson on the map, seeing as we're all from Tucson. Let's look at the census places in Tucson and talk about what they are.
Can you read those, or does it need to be in a little bit more?
Commissioner Freeman has pointed out that he's not from Tucson.
I went to school down here.
That's right. Honorary.
So some of the census places in Tucson are South Tucson, Drexel Heights, Tucson Estates. If it were neighborhoods of Tucson, those would not be identified as census place. This is more different areas that are kind of incorporated areas that have formal boundaries.
So the main census place that makes up the incorporated town of Tucson would be what? You just take your red pointer and kind of show us what that is?
The main, like
the city of Tucson.
It's the city, yeah.
Just kind of show us.
So this is Tucson. There's some islands, South Tucson, but if you follow the red border down and all the way around, one thing you'll notice that in some of the other maps we have been attempting to respect these boundaries, so it does make the districts look a little amoeba-like at times, because as you see, these aren't very straight, precise lines. areas are annexed, areas are unincorporated, and so there are pockets of, they're not compact, they're not contiguous, they're not defined by the census. But in many cases, they're how people think about the area they live, at least as the best level of geography for which we have coverage of the whole state and no disagreement. So since these are official lines, that's why we're opting to use them. Are there other areas you wanted to look at this, or I will offer we can load this layer in Maptitude also, so you're able to see these if you want to be looking at some of your what-if maps.
I think that would be good. When everyone's done with this map, I do have a couple more questions on the splits analysis. Comments.
Can you get street level on this map? I'm just curious.
No, this is a saved layout map. In Maptitude, we can drill into the street level, and like I said, I'd be happy to explore that later. So this, I don't believe is available on the website yet, but we'll make sure we get it up there very shortly. So if we take a break today, I'll hand it off to Buck, and then we'll get it up there probably this afternoon.
Are we doing the same thing on Hispanic voting age population density?
I have not prepared like an official layout to be printed out for that. That's something we could easily do.
Would that, if that wouldn't be hard to do, I think that might be a useful thing to have.
All right. And then I just haven't had a chance yet. We're going to get as much done as we can, but I've been defaulting to the what-if maps. We're also attempting, and we have the data, we just haven't put it together yet, to have a population growth map. So it takes the 2000 population and shows where growth has been happening.
Can that be done by Hispanic voting age growth also?
Yes.
Let's do that.
Okay. So I guess getting back to the splits report, if there's no more questions on this.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Not necessarily on this map, but are we looking solely at the Hispanic population and the all others in this next concentration map? Because there has been growth in all race statistics for the state of Arizona.
Yeah.
I think it would be incumbent for us to take a look at a third iteration of that as well, as far as all voting groups.
Yeah, the one we've been working on is just change in population, so that's everybody. And then I guess we'll also do a Hispanic voting age population one additionally.
And then and also for you've got also blocks of all race populations, correct?
So you'd like to see one for changes in
Well, the concentrations of African Americans, for example, and the change of population.
Okay.
I mean, surprisingly, the greatest change by percentage in the state over the last 10 years was actually in Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders by a percentage. So, not in numbers, but in percentages. So it'd be an interesting to understand where the different groups have moved.
Okay. No problem.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I guess now back to the splits report. Are there other statistics that would be helpful to you guys?
Madam Chair?
Ms. McNulty?
The census place information.
Such as?
My question is,
Oh.
for example, when we looked at the San Luis area in Yuma, I know there are about 110 or more thousand people that live in that part of the world, but they're in various census places. So it would be helpful in looking at the splits report to understand not just the census place that's being split, or not just the population of the census place, but the population of the whole urban area that is comprised of census places. Maybe not just for the splits report, but just in general. And I'm not sure the best way to do that other than to get into Maptitude and start clicking on all the census places and add up the population.
We can take a look at minor civil division, which that might incorporate some of the census places. I'm not sure.
Unless it's a defined census geography, it's hard to do a canned standardized report.
Right.
So if it's a colloquial definition of what's included in that urban area, that would have to be something we do by hand in Maptitude. MSAs are probably, or metropolitan statistical areas, are too large probably to be of use in this context. But we'll look at if there's any other way of grouping that, or if there are standard groupings you would want to look at. We can, in this exercise, we can define custom geographies as well. So like if you decided that there were 15 census places that you wish to be treated as a unit, we can define that and run it in these reports. It's also possible to do, for example, school districts. Those are defined in the census. So any other suggestions along those lines would be welcome.
And I just have one more question. Do we know if there's a splits analysis of our current congressional and legislative districts?
No, but that's an excellent idea. We'll run that for you for Monday.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
When we're speaking of census blocks and tracts, how do those relate to precincts?
The precincts are defined by the counties. They are drawn using census blocks. So each census block exists uniquely in a precinct. All of the other census geography, block groups and tracts, can and do split precinct lines. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
It does. Madam Chair, as an expansion on that, as we are going to be utilizing precinct by precinct voter historical data, how will we be using those as a comparison against voter tracts or blocks?
If I may, Madam Chair and Commissioner Sturts, perhaps it would be useful if I give some background on the process of loading the electoral data into Maptitude for how we deal with exactly that question, and also some background on what is going on with these precincts or VTDs, to use the census terminology. The existing VTDs, as defined by the census, were the ones used in the 2008 and 2010 elections. Those will not be the ones that are used in the 2012 elections. So that's one of the reasons why one of the criteria isn't trying to maintain these precincts whole, because the counties are going to have to redraw their lines. Maricopa County, just for example, has provided us their draft precinct lines. And other things being equal, it would certainly be administratively easier for them if we're able to minimize splitting of those. Other counties may provide those. But the existing precinct lines are going to be redrawn anyway, so there's nothing to be gained by attempting not to split them. As to the question of how we're able to deal with electoral data on lines that are not going to exist in the future, and also when we're splitting these precincts. For example, we may take 20 census blocks from part of one precinct and put them in one district and the other 30 in another. The process for that is disaggregation and reaggregation of the electoral data. And I refer to anyone who wants to see Mr. Desmond's presentation from a couple weeks ago about how we dealt with matching the census geography. Once all of the electoral data was matched to census geography, we knew the census blocks that made up each precinct. For each of the census blocks, we have the voting age population. So the votes cast in that precinct were disaggregated to the census block based on the census block's share of the total voting age population in the precinct. So electoral data that existed initially only on the precinct level was disaggregated to each census block and then re-aggregated to all the higher units of geography. So if you were to go into Maptitude and look on the census place level, the census tract, the census block group, all of these levels that don't match the precinct level, they will have electoral data, which is the re-aggregated block level electoral data. Now I should stress this isn't known as a fact. When someone casts a vote in a precinct, we don't know which individual cast which vote. All we know is the total votes for the precinct. They're disaggregated evenly among the blocks in the precinct. No attempt is made to say, you know, this half of the precinct is more Democratic, this half of the precinct is more Republican. They're distributed evenly and then re-aggregated to the higher levels of geography. And I should stress that is the standard procedure that's been approved in court and by DOJ for dealing with changing electoral lines.
Everybody get that?
Clear as mud. Yeah, we can't take questions right now, but anyone's welcome to fill out a public request to speak form that we can talk about during public comment. More questions, Mr. Sturts, on that? Did that cover your question?
It's
Okay.
the beginning, Madam Chair, it's the beginning of really ratcheting down what we as commissioners and the general public needs to understand about the level of detail that we will be drilling down into as this process continues. And it was a complete explanation. I'd appreciate that. Because there's a lot of data that needs to be compiled together as we move forward.
And just to make sure everyone gets it, just a real easy example. So if you have a precinct with 1,000 people and there's 2 census blocks that make it up, and one has 700 people and one has 300 people, you take the results and you give 70% to the one with 700 people and you give 30% to the one with 300 people. And then you can re-aggregate those blocks because they're the most basic level to any other level that you might draw at.
Okay. Ms. McNulty?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to make one more comment. We're really focusing right now on this because we're talking about splits, but we do have 6 criteria, and they all have to be satisfied. The federal criteria, the Voting Rights Act, and the equal population have to be satisfied without qualification. The other 4 are all qualified to the extent practicable. So although this is what we're focused on right now, our job is to merge all of those criteria, address them all in these districts. Just in case someone's not hearing about the criteria that's most important to them, we will be focusing on that. And we're just talking right now about this particular issue.
Does anyone else have ideas on what else could be incorporated into the splits report that we want to see for now, or no? Mr. Sturts?
Again, as we did last week with mapping directions, that I'd like to leave the option open to sending any questions through our executive director that would be forwarded back through the consultants.
Sounds good.
I think it'd be great if we could show where some of these splits are or describe them colloquially, but I don't know if that's even possible, and we may just have to, look at each of these areas.
I mean, I could attempt to, if you want me to just take one of these. If we want to take Glendale, for instance, or Tucson, since we're in Tucson. Let's look at Tucson. My mouse is not working well on this blue tablecloth. All right, so if you remember, Tucson is split into 2 districts. So On the right side of the screen is district number 2. On the left side is district number 3. I'll use the redistricting tool to show you exactly where Tucson is. It'll be the red area in 1 second. So, yeah, again, just to as a point of emphasis, the census place is not often very pretty districts, but this is the area the census calls Tucson. And you can clearly see the line running down the middle of it, where part of it is in district number 3 and part of it is in district number 2. Are there other areas you'd like to look at right away? Or I should point out that the trying to respect these census place boundaries has been a priority that I've been keeping in mind, but it wasn't expressly exercised for this particular what-if scenario.
I think my point in looking at it and also in asking the question about how you aggregate the census places to create an urban area is just to demonstrate that there are a lot of other things you need to take into account. You know, just looking at this map, you can tell that the different neighborhoods and communities that make up a place like Tucson are not reflected by that census place.
Mm-hmm.
And those are all things that we're going to need to consider in other other criteria in pulling this all together.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, one of those criteria was creating a minority-majority district, which is the proposed District 3 on that map. And I think that's why we needed to split there to capture some of the Hispanic voting age population in West Tucson and South Tucson.
And I believe this line comes, this particular segment of the line comes directly from the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government.
Does that map also show 2 tribal nation voting districts? Mr. Strasma, would those be called separate districts? See how that's our Santa Vera district is?
In this case,
Could you try to put on the tribal subdivision there?
in this case, these are reservation areas. Let me put on the tribal subdivision. You'll see. Okay, so the tribal subdivisions are shaded orange. It might be more helpful if I do this. All right, so zooming out. These are all different tribal subdivisions. And I'll also move the reservation layer on top of it so you can see how those two relate to each other. So reservations are comprised, by and large, of tribal subdivisions. Does that make sense then, or?
Thank you.
Sure. So just as a point of emphasis, this is all Tohono O'odham, and although this isn't connected, it is part of the same reservation, but it's a different tribal subdivision. So in some of our previous versions of the map, this was split off from the larger part of the reservation. We've been working to correct that moving forward. Are there other questions, I guess, specifically about splits or travel areas that we want to look at using this whole counties, or should we go to the next map, which did endeavor to respect some of the census place divisions? Or is there other what-if maps that you would like to see for the future? Talk about right now. If not, I'll just go right to the next one, Commissioner.
Was there, what if whole counties version 4A?
There is. And
Okay.
we did look at that yesterday, but I'm happy to shoot. Yeah. Let me open that one up. It's going to take me a minute to load it, so just
While you're doing that, Mr. Desmond, do we have we have so many of these now. Do we have anything that tells us how we built each of these? You know, version 1 was this, version 2 we added this, version 3 we did that?
not really.
Okay.
It'd probably be good for me to start including a criteria file along with these.
I think we better, because I'm lost now. I've forgotten how we got to where we are in some of these iterations.
I can take you back, but
You don't need to do it right now, but let's not go forward anymore without doing the steps.
I remember these maps, but some of the other ones, you're right. We'd have to look at our transcript, and it's probably easier for him to keep track of that.
while this is loading, is there any other what-if maps that you'd like to see just right away?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Freeman.
And I apologize because I had to appear by Skype yesterday, but just refresh my recollection. Were there proposed changes to version 4A, or was that one we were going to study further?
4A, there was no, it was presented briefly yesterday, but there was no requested changes to it.
Okay.
And while this is loading, let me, I guess, take you back a little bit of how these were created. Whole counties started out just as an attempt to create a map that split as few counties as possible. Version number 2 attempted to not split any tribal lands then, so that was and adjusted to not split the Navajo or the Hopis. Version number 3 then attempted to incorporate the 2 voting rights districts that were submitted by the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government. Version number 4A was based off of version number 3 and attempted to keep all of Yuma whole and all of Santa Cruz whole. Those 2 were split by the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government's lines. And then 4B is the one we just looked at. That was also built off of number 3, and that had some changes that weren't discussed at a meeting, but instead submitted by Commissioner Freeman to the rest of the commission. So.
And one more point is, the beginning of all these maps was our grid map.
Mm-hmm.
Their grid map was adjusted, and these steps were then taken.
Yes, I should have said that. And it wouldn't be a public meeting without some technical difficulties. So. Okay, here is 4A. I can. So, on version number 3, Yuma was split right here. And so in this one, in order to, again, try to maximize the whole county's aspect, Yuma was then kept whole. The other thing was that Santa Cruz was split coming down here. And it actually went like this. So it was then allocated to 2, which created a third border district and kept Santa Cruz whole. So I can turn on any other layers you'd like to see. Let me put on the counties are on, but they're very brief or very light.
Mr. Sturts?
Mr. Desmond, while you're turning layers on, I'd like to take a look at the exact same City of Tucson split as you had just brought up in the other map, just to give an understanding of the change. And if there's also a way to overlay interstates, main traffic corridors.
I believe the City of Tucson split will be very similar, because I think these both reference the same line. Let me check that for you, and then I will turn.
And do you know whether or not you made adjustments to the Green Valley corridor, Green Valley, Sorita?
I don't know for sure, but I don't think I did.
Where did you capture the additional, or where did you give up the additional population?
I think it came up in Maricopa, actually.
Okay.
So. I know this is a little difficult to see, but streets layer is now included. Why don't I move that down so it's on top of everything else?
What are we doing? Excuse me.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McNulty, I was looking to see, as a comparison of the whole county version 4A versus 4B, as it pertained to the question that you had regarding municipality split for the City of Tucson, as well as a request to take a look at the main transportation corridors leading through Tucson, just as a point of reference for ourselves and the viewing public.
They look the same to me, so I'm just confused about which different lot, what we're looking at that's different. There's a difference between 4A and 4B that we're depicting, is that right?
It appears as not, as it regards
Okay.
to the split through the City of Tucson.
Oh, okay, because it doesn't look like it's different here.
It didn't appear.
Okay,
That's why I asked the question.
okay.
Are there other areas? I guess the other area that this one had changed from the previous iteration was not to split Yuma. Initially, there had been a split, kind of running just south of the interstate that divided some of the Hispanic population here and included it in a majority-minority district. Normally, when we've kept Yuma whole in previous versions, it's been kept whole and included with the River District. In this case, it was kept whole and included with parts of Maricopa County in that majority-minority district. But is there anything else on this one you guys would like to see?
Mr. Sturts?
Do you have the ability to get population centers on this map?
Population centers.
The population concentrations.
Yeah. would you like to see total population density or just voting age population density? Just trying to find the same theme we used for the map that'll be online. Try this. Something doesn't seem quite right there.
Madam Chair, while Mr. Desmond is doing that, I just want to, again, emphasize that we're just looking at one issue right now, and strategic telemetry is now doing thumbnail competitive analysis for us on each of these maps, and the one that we're looking at, or 4B, is is that Marty's music? Sorry. The one that we're looking at has, because one of the districts would arguably be competitive. It has a 3% R advantage. 2 would be D with a 13.87 and 40%, 37.8% Democratic advantage, and then there would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Republican districts with an advantage ranging from 7.5% to 32%. So that issue has not been factored into any of these maps at all yet.
And Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
that would include the urban Maricopa County districts, which on the next iteration are going to be de-designated for the next iteration, and then for version 5C, strategic telemetry is going to go and recraft those. That was the instruction, considering compactness concerns and municipal boundary concerns. So we'll see what happens with that next iteration.
This is now.
That would be 5C, right?
Do we have 5A and B already, or?
Well, here's what might be confusing you. Whole County's version B was the one I was going to modify. I asked Mr. Desmond to modify and create Whole County's version 5B. So the letter is going to track, because 4A is the one that creates the 3 border districts. So if there's going to be another iteration of that map, we would designate that 5A. Do you see the?
I do, but you haven't conceived 5A yet.
I have not. I did not conceive 4A. So.
Okay, but you have you conceived of you have conceived of 5C, and just tell me again what that is, because I'm
Well,
going to keep us
okay.
all in one place.
5B would be the changes that I gave Mr. Desmond today to make to 4B, except as for the urban Maricopa County districts, he's just going to de-designate those. So there's going to be no district information there. The point being, we're starting, or at least I'm starting from the outside, working my way in, and I want to see what sort of districts could be, as a theoretical exercise, constructed around the urban areas of Maricopa County that, based upon this, what's being called the whole counties concept. It involves more than that, but we're just calling that, for the sake of convenience, whole counties. So,
And what else will happen in 5B?
well, there were other changes. I pointed out an area of Maricopa County that was included in proposed District 1, so that line would be redrawn to follow that county line. And then I asked him to make some changes in Pinal County to include the non-Indian reservation portions of Pinal County in proposed District 1, and then place the tribal land in Pinal County into proposed District 3. And then I further suggested that if proposed District 3 is underpopulated, that he look to capture that population in far west, the far western area of Maricopa County, borrowing population from the western side of what is now proposed District 8. Of course, that district in version 5B is going to go away, but if he needs to get population to bring proposed District 3 up to close to the number we need it to be, that's where I directed him to take that population from. Now, for whole counties version 5C, he would take 5B and then attempt to construct districts within that unallocated area. So you'd leave everything else the same with 5B, but then attempt to draw new districts within the urban area, with the exception of the voting rights district, which is District 7. He's going to leave that the same.
And just as a point of clarification for me, the consideration I was going to use when drawing those districts for 5C was just to, where possible, keep together the census place lines, and also to make them as compact as possible. That's what you were looking for with those?
For this what if, yeah, yes.
Okay. So, getting back to the map, this is shaded population. So the white areas, again, are areas with where nobody lives. So, down in the southwestern corner, the Goldwater Range, and then some other large tracts of, I'm guessing, federal lands mostly, and things like that. Did you want me to zoom in to any of the municipalities to see this?
Mr. Sturts?
The, what I was looking at was the I-8 corridor and the population that carries along the I-8 corridor. And as we've got a relationship between a consistent relationship between the people living along the I-8 corridor and connecting that going into the next district. I just want to see what the sort of volume of population was along that corridor.
So,
And right now, Madam Chair, the reason I'm asking some of these questions in this way is that as we continue to develop and expand, this is almost purely an exercise of review of what will be coming next, as Commissioner McNulty was responding to. There are other considerations that we'll continue to be making as we drill down from the county level, city level, census tract level, and also then falling into communities of interest, and transportation corridors as being one potential community of interest as people living along transportation corridors. So thank you.
Are there any other what-if scenarios? So we talked about one yesterday where we combined the river district and the 3 border districts. That'll be Monday when we maybe see that.
Yes.
Okay, and any other, you had some changes maybe to your 3-district one, or not, the 3-border district? Sure, we can do that.
And that one, it's not perfect, but I do have something on that one to present today.
Oh, good, okay.
Of the ones you guys suggested yesterday, that seemed the most manageable for today with the compressed time frame. So it's not done, but that's something we can look at after the break.
Great. So just a point of clarification too, for the record, I don't want Mr. Strasma to think that I was critical of his presentation just now when I said clear as mud. It was a grad school answer, and I'm at the kindergarten comprehension level, I'm afraid, on that one. So I'm going to have to do some learning. So thank you. It was an excellent answer. It's above my pay grade. It's 4:29 p.m. We'll take a brief recess, and how about 10 minutes, and be back shortly. Thanks. Okay, the time's 4:52 p.m. and we'll enter back into public session, and concluding the recess. And we were in the midst of agenda item 4, which is talking about these what-if scenarios for the congressional map. And I believe we were just about getting ready to maybe talk about the 3-river district one. I mean, 3-border district. 3-river districts. That's a whole new one that I haven't told you about. 3-border districts.
Yes, and so I will, unless there's anything else having to do with these whole county 4A and 4B, I will open up the 3-border district. Again, this one, it does not have the level of population equality that we've been trying to meet in other versions. We have been not necessarily going down to a 0 person population deviation, but trying to keep it under 1,000. This one's slightly above there, and that's just a reflection of the time. I just ran out of time to getting this one ready this morning. So if you look, the worst deviation is about 9,600 people, about 1.3% underpopulated. So just be aware of that this is not finished. And in this one, what I attempted to do was just take the 3-border district map and really try to maximize respect for census place boundaries. So I guess probably the best way to look at it would be just to drill down a little bit and then turn on that layer and just kind of track the line and see how it zigs and zags to go around those. So bear with me for 1 second. I will do that, unless there is something else that you guys would like to see right away. And I found it useful to turn on the census place layer and shade those individually, so you'll be able to see that here. So each unique blip is a defined census place, and this is a good illustration of how much of the state is not covered by census places. So only the little flecks of color on this map are census places. So if we zoom in a little bit. So the line is pretty pretty ragged. Some of that reflects different geographic areas, but then if you look at things like this, if initially the line had been drawn, Buck, is this better? to kind of cut right through here. But it did slice these two areas in half, Paulden and Chino Valley. So adjusting to give half of, to allocate them wholly to one district or the other, 3 or 4, you can see now that this line does zig and zag quite a bit. It is contiguous. There is a sliver of Chino Valley that runs up to this little pocket, but it's not exactly the most the prettiest line you'll ever see. And if you didn't have this layer looking at these, you'd think we were doing something pretty, pretty unreasonable here, I bet. So, the area where this is obviously most difficult is in Maricopa County. So this is Maricopa County. I did not do much to district number 7. That was the voting rights district, and I, just in order to keep the 2 benchmark districts up there, I didn't touch it very much. So currently district number 7 is 54.13% Hispanic, slightly below the current benchmark, and our district number 7, excuse me, is 50.48, and then district number 2 is 54.13. So I think if you look at these, they do look a little funny. Things like district number 8 is a very, very, very north-south district, and that was just intended to try to keep these areas together. So if we drill in, you'll be able to see. So Peoria is a very oddly shaped area, or not oddly shaped, but just a lot of these run very north-south, and as a result, some of the districts do too. So in order to keep things like Goodyear intact, you have to make a district that looks kind of silly. But it does make things easier if all of one district is, or all of one census place is within the same district.
Can you remind me what the, or if Mr. Sturts or Mr. Desmond can, Commissioner Sturts or Mr. Desmond can remind me what changes were recommended for this particular version? Was it based on the River District, version 4? And then
No, Madam Chair, Commissioner Herrera, the purpose of this was to take the 3 border districts, again, as an exercise to take a look at how districts would reconfigure themselves if we were trying to keep intact existing city lines. And I chose, because we were working at the 3 border district, I chose that as the map to adjust to. But as an exercise in discovery, and again, I think the question came up earlier that the request has been made to see what has happened over the last 10 years about what the growth tracks have been, and looking at that sequentially, and you'll know Commissioner Herrera and Freeman, based on the growth areas in Maricopa County, you'll see that as the cities expanded and grew, they grew into this sort of amalgamated form. So that's why I wanted to see how the districts, even though they may not look attractive, or might not, again, as Commissioners McNulty had said earlier, that we talk about compactness, they might not fit that criteria, but might have some relevance in regards to the continuity of the community, and then again, the communities of interest, as they might have some impact on those. So they might not look pretty, but they might actually be a very functional district. So that was the purpose of the exercise.
thank you.
And there are places where this does work well. If there's a large, and there's 2 towns that neighbor each other, it makes sense, I think, to just intuitively, even if it skews the line a little bit, change those. And just as I guess an informational note, so a very jagged line, something like that, will affect the score on the Polsby-Popper compactness test, but not on the REAC. So the REAC is just comparing it to a circle that contains it, and the Polsby-Popper, where it stretches that line out into a circle, the more squiggly the line, the worse the Polsby-Popper score. So I think that illustrates why we think it's important to use a couple of those measures of compactness. So are there other areas you'd like me to dive into right away? If not, I can just kind of show you some of these.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Mr. Desmond, I think that I'd want you to dive into the places where you actually put your work product, because you said that you didn't actually finish it all. So where'd you concentrate your most efforts?
The border between districts 3 and 4 did seem to just cut through quite a few little areas. So I started out, right up against the border up here. and move some of these over. You will notice this is now a slightly split reservation, so I'd have to clean that up. And again, that's just a result of me kind of running out of time. Tracking this down, areas in Flagstaff and some of these areas in Yavapai County too, took some time to balance the districts once I allocated the whole census place. And then I'd say the bulk of my time I spent in Maricopa County, because so many of these large and very populated areas were divided up into 2 or 3 or 4 different congressional districts. I did try to clean that up as best as I can. I wouldn't say I was complete in it, but I made a lot of progress. I think. If we look over here, when we look at Buckeye, it was hard to keep this this whole, and just because it is such a kind of a discombobulated area, and there's places where I wasn't able to do it where I really did try. For instance, Scottsdale, I tried very hard to keep that wholly contained in one district, but I couldn't. So there's a slight, maybe 10,000 people down here that just didn't fit. So, and then Tempe, I think it was in 4 districts. I got it down to 2 districts. So those are just things that, same thing with Mesa, was almost in in 2 districts, but ended up being in 3, some of these areas right here. So District 9, if I shade just the districts, you'll see they are a little funky. So if I turn that off. So, and District 7 is relatively good, because I didn't touch that one very much. It's fortunate that it's almost entirely Phoenix, though, too. So. And then if we go down, the last place where there was obviously some issues was down in Tucson. Let me turn on the labels. Okay, so Tucson is split, kind of inevitably, just as a necessity to keep the district number 2 a voting rights district. But other than that, I was pretty successful at not splitting many of the other areas, if you notice. So, following it up from the border, I'll zoom in a little more. And let me know if there's a particular place you'd like me to look at. Again, this isn't necessarily a pretty boundary, but I think it's a defensible one because it is 2 different municipalities. So, Summer Haven, I either neglected, or there's a large population right here that I just didn't have time to get to. So.
They're squirrels.
That's the other category, is the squirrel rights districts. So.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Sturts?
Mr. Desmond, is there anything that you found in doing this exercise that you found compelling, interesting, or an impossible mapping from a mapper's point of view?
To some extent, Arizona does lend itself to this type, just because there is so many unincorporated areas, that if you are using the census place, you do have population that does not live in a census place that can be used to kind of tweak around the edges. I think without looking at these, people might think the lines look a little funny, but if this were to be a criteria you guys found exceedingly important, it's certainly something we could definitely maximize. There are obviously trade-offs here in compactness and contiguous, but it's I don't know if I'm answering your question or.
Madam Chair. Commissioner Sturts didn't ask me, but I'm going to answer his question anyway. The thing I found compelling and interesting was that there are 7 Republican districts on this map. One has a 4% Republican advantage, and the others range from 13.7 to 30%. And there are 2 Democratic districts. So we're not taking competitiveness into account at all. And again, in this exercise.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Mr. Desmond, does the spreadsheet field automatically populate that you've attached to this map?
Does not I mean,
Is this attachment concur with the map in front of it?
Yes.
Oh, it does. Okay, good.
Well, I can double check. This is the data table that is associated with it.
Yes.
And if we. So the numbers we have available, and I didn't use these as a consideration, are the first district is 51.9618. Does that match what you're
It does,
seeing there?
yes.
Okay. So, and again, those numbers are just an average of the last statewide elections from 2008, 2010. I believe there was 10 elections in total. More so from 2010 than 2008, just because of how the 4-year cycles work. Or it could be more from 2008 than 2010. I think I have that backwards.
And Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
The fields that you're populating in those, which is, if as far as these percentages are concerned, they're percentages of voting age, population at that time, or voters, or what comprises this number?
So that number is the precincts that comprise the census blocks. So the census, the results are disaggregated to the census block, and then automatically re-aggregated to these proposed districts in Maptitude. The other set of numbers, the compactness numbers, are compactness reports that we run in Maptitude, and the top set, and again, these fields are all in the data table Excel files that are available on the website with the maps that accompany them, and the top table is the voting age population breakdowns by race.
So as far as competitiveness, this does not take into account any voting history?
Does not take in, it takes into account the results, but nothing at like an individual level to see.
Well, the reason I'm asking is that you've left off 1/3 of the registered voters, which is the independents and others.
No, because this is, well, your voter registration is not reflected at all in these numbers. It's how because we don't know how people voted. We just know this is based off of not off of registration numbers, but off of election result,
That's what I was trying to get to. Okay, this is election results.
not registration.
Got it, thank you.
So, and I should point out, these are two-way percentages, so that results for other or Libertarian or Green Party are not counted in these, so that the Republican and the Democrat number add up to 100. There's no elections statewide that have been won by a third party, so we just included those two. Those other results are available, and you guys have access to those. They'll be on the website also, but for these combined averages, they're not.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
just to clarify that then, on the competitiveness measure, it's the quick view based on the 2008, 2010 election cycles only. This is not a statistic based on percentages of registered voters in those districts. And you have, in terms of election results, you haven't looked at 2006 and 2004.
Correct. And these were just added to the data table following, I believe it was last Wednesday. Ken made the presentation on compactness and competitiveness, and I think you just asked to include these going forward as a kind of a relative measure, a reference point. Again, this is not the definition of competitiveness or anything. It's just something that we included for reference.
And Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
Mr. Desmond, I might also be interested to know the voter registration percentages going forward. I think during Mr. Strasmus' presentation, he did note some correlation between the registration percentages and what may or may not be viewed as a competitive district. So I think that might be helpful data point for us to have as well.
Okay. Just double check, that is not a problem.
And Madam Chair,
Mr. Sturts?
did you develop a criteria table, a splits table? What are we going to call that table?
I think we'll call that a splits report, and
Okay.
it'll probably be included along with this too. We'll just keep adding to this kind of underlying data. And going forward for the stuff Monday, we'll attempt to have that all squared away. Like I mentioned earlier, we're still kind of finishing that. We're working on that this morning and the drive down here. So we'll keep plugging away on that this weekend and hopefully have that all set for you guys next week.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, one last question, then we'll wrap this up. If my math is correct, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because it's hard to see at this level. It appears as though we've got 10 uninterrupted counties.
I haven't run those numbers. I can. that doesn't sound unlikely. That sounds.
And I was looking at the remaining 5, just as again data points. How many districts that the remaining 5 counties are split into?
That is.
For example, Pima is split into 3 districts. 3 congressional districts are representing Pima County. How many districts are representing Pinal County?
So Pinal County is also 3.
3 districts. And obviously many districts in Maricopa County. And then Yavapai County, it appears as though it's split into 2 districts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh no, I'm sorry. That is not correct. There is just a tiny.
Oh, it is. It does have a touch of 8 in.
Yeah.
Is that a cleanup issue or is that a need?
That's to reflect that Peoria goes into Yavapai a little bit.
Oh, I see. Okay. I'm sure that's it for me.
Okay. Any other comments on this particular what-if scenario? Okay, I believe and is there any other scenario that anyone wants to have generated by Mr. Desmond for next week?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
assuming that the what-if scenarios we went over yesterday haven't been done?
Have not been done.
That they'll probably be presented on Monday?
Yes, yes. So I'll start with the ones from yesterday, then I'll pick up the ones that were asked for today. I'll see how much I can get through. So,
Okay.
and Ken also. So.
I had a question from the public, from a member of the public before recess, if they could comment on the congressional grid map, and I don't know if that gentleman is here. Yes, oh good, I can't see you. So I'm happy to take comments from the public on the congressional grid map what-if scenarios. If anyone has any, you're welcome to come up, and this gentleman I know would like to. And did you fill out a request to speak form? Okay, great. And your name? Fred. I've got it. I saw it in here. Fred Heighton, representing Self from Pima.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Okay.
think so. Perfect.
Okay. I didn't have any set comments when I came in, but several questions have occurred to me since I've been sitting there. So some of the questions have since been answered, like I was wondering how close the populations were on the maps we just saw, and I think I've just seen they're pretty close. And then my other question is, you know, how is this process actually working? I hear you requesting the consultant to make changes, but that, and then he goes away, I guess, and makes those changes. Does this process take place in public like this, or do you go home and play with the software and try and do the stuff yourself? I mean, this seems a very inefficient way of actually doing it. I've done a map, so I know how tough it is, but I'm just wondering, what happens next? What do you guys do next after today? Would anyone like, Linda, would you like to tell me what?
Legal counsel? Okay, great. Yeah, so I agree. It is a somewhat inefficient seeming process because we're having to come up with our own ideas for how we'd like to maybe see some lines move and change, but then our mapping consultant goes away and makes those changes for us. We do work at home. We all have laptops with the software loaded onto it, and have ideas. And what we can do is email ideas for changes to our executive director, Ray Bladine, and then Ray can take them to our mapping consultant and let all the other commissioners know what an individual commissioner has suggested. Right now, we're still at the macro level. We're still way up here talking about what-if scenarios. And these what-if scenarios are based upon some public input ideas that we got from the first round of public hearings. And there's a lot more that has to be done. As you heard, we've got to comply with the Voting Rights Act and equal population, and then 6 constitutional criteria.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's still, but was there another part to your question that I haven't answered yet?
No, no, I've got a few more.
Okay, feel free.
Oh, the census blocks are fixed, and yet I understood you were going to take the prisons out of it. And so if you do that, isn't it going to distort the rest of the map?
I'm sorry.
You don't understand the question?
How we're going to address the prisons, we talked about this yesterday, and it was on our agenda today, and Mr. Herrera gave a good summary of it. Would you like to repeat that?
Sure.
Oh, did I miss? Sorry, I thought you said prisons. Did you
I
say
did.
precincts?
Prisons.
Prisons, okay.
Oh.
Yeah, because there's blocks, the census blocks that were described.
Mhm.
And I thought you were going to move the prisoners from the population. But this, you know, this detail of information is in there in the map. So somehow, I'm not sure what your name is, but the consultant has to remove that block with that information in. It would seem to me that would then distort the other blocks. But that's a technical question, but he needs to answer, I guess.
You can answer it.
So I believe if I understand what you're saying, I think the way we're gonna deal with it is attempt to use prison populations as a criteria for reaching the 710,000 that each census district needs to have for purposes of Voting Rights Act analysis. Those populations will not be counted towards minority numbers. I believe the official direction of the commission is just to be conscious of it and to try to work to minimize any effect.
Oh, I see. So that it might distort the results, not the map.
Well, I don't think we're able to remove that population from the total
Yeah.
population
Okay.
of the congressional districts. They all do need to meet the 710, and those people need to be counted.
So a rural population would look bigger because of that prison population, and so the fewer people in that area would be empowered. They would have more power than people in another district.
Yes, and we've been directed to try to minimize that by, if possible, allocating the prison population equally among the 9 districts.
You can do that?
We
That's going to be a fudge factor, sort of.
Well, we can attempt to.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. My other question, you sort of answered. How do you judge competitiveness? And I assume because you're combining 2008 and 2010, you're doing on congressional votes, who voted for the congressmen of that district, and they get voted every 2 years. But it would seem to me, 2008 being an election year, more people voted in 2008 than 2010, which may upset the balance. That may be something.
Yeah, and that's a great point. The point is, though, we haven't made any decisions yet on how we're going to measure competitiveness.
Okay.
There are numerous ways, and I actually encourage the public to look at our website online a few weeks back. Mr. Strasma, our mapping consultant, gave a presentation on the different measures of compactness that we could use and also different measures of competitiveness.
Yeah.
And talks about some of that, and the commission hasn't made a decision yet on what it's going to use, so.
When I did my map, we had some software that was developed by another group, you probably know about it, and I used the measure who voted for which president in 2008. But that's something you might want to think about. And I have a map, and you said I could present it. How would I do that? Would I have to bring in my computer and?
You could come with a jump stick and we could present it on screen. You could also, and you could come and speak at one of our meetings. So this second item on the agenda, map presentations, is the opportunity for the public to actually present maps that they've drawn.
Okay.
You're also we're happy to take things electronically if you want to submit it to our executive director, Ray Bladine. He would take that and then ensure that all of us got that information.
And I would probably like to run it through this software to make sure it's, and you say this will be up and I can use that.
Yes, that the online version of this is going live today, if it isn't already.
Okay.
It's right now.
Okay, that's just about it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
You might want to
Mr.
make a clarification for the audience today regarding the 2004-2006 voting data that will be used as an inclusion. Pursuant to the
Yes,
conversation
we
yesterday.
made, during yesterday's meeting, one of the agenda items was whether to go back and include 2004-2006 election data. And the commission we got some information from legal counsel and from Mr. Adelson, and decided that it definitely makes sense to get that information, the 2004, 2006. So that is happening. Currently, our mapping consultant's working on that. Was there an additional aspect to that? Okay. Right. Go ahead.
Saying that the competitive analysis that's being used, the quick view analysis, is purely based on the data that they're currently having stored in their system, which is 2008, 2010.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Herrera?
Now, we agreed to use the 2004, 2006 voting data to determine the DOJ, just meet the DOJ requirements for voter polarization, issues with minority voters, but we did not agree that we would use 2004, 2006 data to determine competitiveness. That's something that hasn't been decided yet.
That's correct. We did not decide. We have not made a decision on what we're going to include in our competitiveness measure or which method we're going to use. So that's still forthcoming.
Or, Madam Chair, I might add whether we will use one measure or whether we might use several measures for comparison purposes, because Mr. Strasma explained to us yesterday that it would be very possible and not difficult to pull up different combinations of elections to get different perspectives on what the competitiveness of a district might be, in the same way that we're using different measures of compactness to look at a district from different perspectives. There's no one way to look at it necessarily.
And I would just make a quick comment on these what-if scenarios, too. We're doing this for both congressional maps and legislative maps, of course, and we're getting to that on the agenda next. The goal is to have draft maps that we can take on the road, so to speak, do a road show with a second round of public hearings that will have a draft legislative map and a draft congressional map. And then the idea is to get public comment on those draft maps. The goal is to start that second round of public hearings the last week in September. So we'll see if we can get there. So over the next few weeks, we're going to work our hardest to try to get some draft maps generated. So any other comments from commissioners on congressional?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Mr. Herrera?
I had mentioned yesterday that I had some changes that I wanted to think about for the proposed River District version 5, and I wanted some time to think about it, so I wanted to see if I can give you those changes or the proposed changes now, and so you can work on them over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday.
Sounds,
So
don't forget tonight, too.
Oh, and tonight, I meant Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So let's focus on District 3 and 5. So let's move the Pinell and Pima County portions of District 3 into 5. That's not including the areas of Queen Creek and Santan Valley. So again, with the exception of Queen Creek and Santan Valley areas, move the Pinell County and Pima County portions into District 3, of District 3 into District 5. Okay.
Sorry. So that not including Santan Valley and what other area?
And not including Santan Valley and the Queen Creek area.
Okay.
And the other issue that I wanted to address for the what-if scenario version 5 of the River District is that moving District 3 so there's that arm from District, so moving District 3 into the arm from District 5 that grabs Apache Junction, North Mesa, and also Fountain Hills. Remember we talked about that arm that Commissioner McNulty was referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
So I believe there you asked me to take, out of CD5, take out the non-reservation land of Fountain Hills and and trade that with the eastern portion of Congressional District 4, is that correct?
I'm sorry.
Do you mind if I just load that version up again and we can?
Definitely.
I can study it later.
So we're talking about changes to Congressional River District version 4, correct?
Correct.
Not version 5?
Well, it'll be version 5.
I think don't we have a version 5 that we looked at yesterday?
That was a change to, correct, that was a change to version 5 of the River District.
So this would be version 6 or 5A or?
5A is fine.
Okay. I think you're talking about this area of,
Correct.
you would like to remove, to do what with this area then?
So that's what we were calling the arm, I guess. From District 5 that grabs Apache Junction, North Mesa, and Fountain Hills. So move District 3 into the arm from District 5.
So move District 3 to come up and take these areas?
Correct, so move District 3 into the arm from District 5 that grabs Apache Junction, North Mesa, and Fountain Hills.
Okay, and then to accommodate that population that will be removed from 5, where should I?
Say it again?
So if we take that area away from 5 and put it into 3, where should 5 make up that population, I guess?
They trade each other.
Probably in 4, right above it, maybe. If you move that arm down into 3, then you could move 5 a little bit, just a little bit. Got another arm there.
It's, we're trading, so you trade the arm of District 5 for the rural Pinell County and Pima County parts of District 3. So they trade for each other, so that should kind of equalize the population.
Okay.
Does that make sense now?
Yeah.
Good. So you may be able to now work Friday and Saturday and probably have something else.
I'm sure I'll have something to do. Are there other changes to this one or other what-if maps for next week on the congressional side?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman.
don't forget that I had a version B to whatever the last version of the River District was.
That's right. That's right. So, 6B is to take Congressional District 5 out of the non-reservation lands, dealing with that same area, correct?
I believe it was to put the Fountain Hills area, there was a swap with the Fountain Hills area.
With
That
the
makes
eastern
sense.
portion of, yeah.
Right.
Correct, okay. That makes sense.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera.
Mr. Desmond, what I'd like to do, I think you're doing that for all what-if scenarios, but I'd definitely love to see that competitiveness score that you've been creating for the other ones, because I'd like to see, because even though, I mean, we're doing what-if scenarios, I am keeping competitiveness in you know, in the forefront, or in my mind when I'm creating these, and making sure that that it is not a skewed, even, some of these ones have, you know, six districts that are not competitive at all, that favor one district, one party or the other, and I don't want to. I want to make sure that we are creating as many competitive districts as possible. So definitely love to look at that information.
And I believe also a criteria for version, what I will call 6A, was to try to make more competitive districts. That was from Commissioner McNulty had asked for that yesterday.
And now, could you put that competitiveness measure so people in the audience can see this?
Right now? Or
Well, it doesn't have to be today. That's your Saturday and Sunday work. So
Yeah.
if you don't mind doing that, because I think what we want to do is allow the people and you know the
Yeah.
public to make sure that they can see that information, because I think it's a good piece of information for them to look at.
those data tables that we've been providing you are available on the website.
Okay. Oh, they are. You know what? I did not know
Forward.
that.
They will have not only just the racial breakdown, but also the compactness and that competitiveness in there too. Yes,
Okay,
Madam Chair?
and
Mr.
also the
Sturt?
splits coming forward too.
Mr. Sturts?
Will Mr. Bladine be available to receive emails tomorrow that he will be able to forward to our mapping consultant?
Yes, he's nodding yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We're not supposed to take comments from the public unless you want to come up and talk to us about these congressional maps. So, and I know you've filled out a form. This is a request to speak form. Let me pull it out. This is Guy Keenan representing self from Pima County. Yes, and please be sure to spell your name for the record.
My name's Guy Keenan, and my last name is Keenan. And I live in Tucson. I've only been to one of your meetings prior to this one, and so I may be missing the bigger picture. But it seems like you're doing an awful lot of work here with all of these scenarios without considering competitiveness, because that's key. And as I understand it, the main complaint with the prior redistricting, Independent Redistricting Commission of 10 years prior was that despite all of their work, which was, I know, done in good faith, and despite all of the litigation that all followed the work and the maps, we ended up with either the same or less competitiveness than we had before. So it seems to me that it seems like equal population is a definite concern here, and that the Voting Rights Act is a definite concern here. But I think competitiveness should be next. Because if I understood, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, is it Ms. McNulty? If I understood your comment correctly, it seemed like 7 out of these 9 districts were Republican districts, and that the competitiveness was way off as a percentage measure in most of these districts, up to 30 or 35% off, favoring one party over another. Now, I don't see how it profits you at all to be studying the intricacies of these district maps if they're that far off competitively. I mean, you could do better with a dartboard, I think. I mean, really, why do that? Why start here and then tinker, with the boundaries when you're so far off competitively? And I'm sure that it's much more complicated than I understand right now about measures of competitiveness, et cetera. But I really think that from just a lay person in the public's point of view, I think our political system is very skewed now by the lack of competitiveness in districts. And this is your chance to fix that, or at least try to make it better. So I know you're kind of get to that, but I wish you guys would focus on it now. I know you have those other two criteria, population and Voting Rights Act, that you have to consider. And I know there's 6 criteria, which is an impossible job to match all those 6 criteria. But at least from my perspective as a member of the voting public, I haven't had a competitive race to vote for. I've lived in the same house for 22 years. I've never had a competitive race to vote for. Maybe once or twice on the congressional level, never on the state legislative level, ever. Most of the time, there's only one party's person running for state representative in my district. I mean, 2 people run because the other parties know that they don't have a shot. And I just don't think that's fair to the voters to do that. So, you know, for what it's worth, I really wish you guys would focus on that. And I think it would probably cut down your workload, maybe 90%. Could be, I mean, you guys are killing yourselves up here, and that's very apparent, and not to mention staff. But I would hope that maybe you could kind of laser in on competitiveness, try to consider that first among equals. I mean, except for these other 2 equals that are first. And, you know, hopefully to kind of, you know, make it easier on yourselves and everyone else down the line. So that's all I've got. Thank you very much. And I would have stayed for the regular comment period, but I have chronic pain and I can't sit that long. So I appreciate your letting me talk now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I'd like to address something. You know, I know that we're all doing our what-if scenarios, and we are looking at it a little differently. I'm assuming, you know, for example, I don't, my river district didn't have 3 borders, but that's fine. It had 2 border districts, but it had a river district in other areas. But when I'm putting these together, I am looking at obviously the Voting Rights Act and equal population, but the issue of competitiveness is an important issue, and one that I am looking at. I know Commissioner McNulty is, and I'm hoping that my other fellow commissioners are doing the same thing. We have a lot of criteria to look at. Competitiveness is equally as important, and we are looking at it, so rest assured that we are doing that. So, thank you.
Lynn St. Angelo, representing SELF from PIMA.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I also had a comment on the congressional maps dealing with the data table. Just from a data standpoint, it's very important when you have a small amount of data, you get outliers that skew the data very big. When you have larger amount of data, that outlier criteria kind of goes away, which is one reason that when you do polling and that kind of thing, you try to get a large sample. The same thing is true with the data here. Basically, you are making a judgment on every one of these based on only the 2008-2010 election results. And in my opinion, that is that kind of outlier. You're going to get that kind of skewing happening because you have a small amount of data field. To include the 2004-2006 election results only makes logical sense from a data standpoint alone, especially since you are making judgments basically as you're looking at these maps, and you're getting a skewed viewpoint if you only look at 2 sets of data. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'm sorry. Please. This is on the congressional maps, what-if scenarios.
Yes, my name is Cheryl Lamanna. It's SHIRL LAMONNA. And I'm not a mapping expert. I do understand that you have the various constitutional requirements to deal with for the redistricting and all the what-if scenarios. Please excuse me, I don't have access to some of the maps that you've been looking at today, and perhaps Commissioner Herrera has addressed this with his last reiteration about the Pinal and the PIMA. But I will say, I just have 2 quick comments. I'm very pleased to see that you have 3 border districts here in Arizona, because I think we really do need to have 3 representatives in Congress to deal with the various representatives on the border issues. Second of all, and this might be another what-if scenario that could be explored. We know that we have this issue with the Tucson sector, as they call it on the news, between Tucson and Phoenix, and the drug trafficking and the crime, and the increased home invasions and things like that that are going on. And I would just suggest that I haven't seen on any of these maps Pinal and PIMA linked together. And I'm just kind of just throw it out for what it's worth. Is that a possibility that we should be looking at it, since there does seem to be some sort of a linkage? Thank you.
Thank you. This is Christine Bauserman, representing Citizens for Common Sense Redistricting from PEMA.
And it's B-A-U, S as in Sam, E-R-M-A-N. One thing I wanted to ask is, when you show these maps, well, and I know now we have it online, we can see the backup data, but it would be kind of nice to hear this version meets like 4 out of 5 of the requirements, and like what they are, that it meets compact, contiguous, whatever the 4 or 5 are, just so we kind of know. I heard that one time online, it was really helpful. And another thing that hasn't been clarified in a long, long time, are these maps, are they based on the original grid maps? I think they are, and you kind of move the lines, but it might be nice to hear that, because it was a constitutional requirement. About the data, the 2006 and 2010 data were 2 times in this history where we had huge turnovers. In 2006, the Democrats took over the House. In 2010, the Republicans took over the House. And I've kind of alluded to this before. When you give the Republicans and Democrats, you should give the independents in this state. And I know all the requirements of Prop 106 always say you're supposed to be nonpartisan. So why you're considering, you almost have to consider voter registration, because Pima County, especially southern Arizona, is not pigeonholed. We do not vote. People got tired of all the incumbents, and they voted them out, and they did it again. And I'm already hearing everybody's tired of all the politicians again, and we may do it again. And people really do vote across party lines, so it doesn't matter how many, it's more registered. You can't tell or predict how people vote. And you guys are supposed to be drawing maps and lines. You're not supposed to be electing candidates. This isn't a campaign. You're not supposed to be taking into account where they live, who is going to run. People want more competitive districts. They got to get out there and find candidates to run. And there should be people who run if they're that passionate about it. But the 6 and 10 data really, I think, is different and should all be included. Now, another thing specifically about the maps, I like the 3 border districts and the River District 4. I think they could be kind of combined. But one thing for a community of interest in a geographical feature is in District 1 and 2, the southern border, the Santa Cruz border, there's a big mountain range down through there. And so it's like Patagonia and Sonoita kind of belong more in 1, because the only way they can get to the rest of Santa Cruz is like around the mountain. And if you just know events, like we go to events, I'm in Tanque Verde, and I will go to events in Sonoita, like their fair, and I will go to Cochise because it's on my side of the mountain. Just to put that out there. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Another speaker? Thank you. This is Jack Russa, representing SELF from Tucson.
And that's spelled Jackroosa. Well, this is my first meeting, so hopefully I stay within the run rules here on the comments. What I'd like to say, I think it's in the public's best interest to have multiple districts along the border. Having multiple districts provides diversity of thought, diversity of solutions from our representatives as we deal with the border issues. And after all, diversity is something we should all be looking for. I don't know how that fits into the criteria that you're looking for as far as the Voting Rights Act and being competitive and so forth. But I do think having multiple representatives along the districts helps generate different ideas, different solutions, as opposed to one individual representing the entire border. Maybe the next one's just a comment, because I think the meeting's for y'all and not necessarily for us, but it's confusing sitting out there watching the maps evolve and not knowing how or what changed from one map to the next, and trying to follow along. But again, if y'all can follow it, then it's okay by us. Okay, that's all I got.
Thank you. Anyone else on the congressional district maps before we move on? Okay, I did receive that. Is this D. Pfeiffer?
D. Pfeiffer, P-F-E-I-F-F-E-R. Eiffer. And I'm from Vail. And I just wanted to say I was pleased to see the maps that have the 3 border districts. I think it's very important that we have at least, well, the more the better, although the one with the 4, I didn't think that worked very well. But for us to have the most representation in Congress that we can for the people and the problems that are along the border. So I agree with Cheryl's comments and the lady before me, her comments regarding that, as well as the lady before me that was talking about that we need to get the people out there to run. We need to go find qualified people to run. And again, remember that competitiveness, that's up to us. We need to do that. So I think that was a very good point that she brought out. And again, competitiveness is last on the list, and I hope that you remember that, because I know what it really means. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another speaker on this topic. Do you have a request to speak form already filled out?
John Vanderbuken. V-A-N-D-E-B-E-U-K-E-N. I noticed as you were talking, you mentioned how you were putting these areas together, trying to keep municipalities together, trying to keep Indian reservations together, and in some cases counties, or most cases counties. And then I noticed that you had a special group here that came in and requested that you break up Tucson, a coalition, as I recall. Are there other coalitions that have evolved in the state? Is that the only coalition that's occurred, that you have recognized and made changes for?
Legal counsel, can we answer that question? Or?
I wondered if the commissioners have solicited coalitions to come forward.
Madam Chair, it's not a violation of the open meeting law to respond since it's on the agenda, but on the other hand, this really is a time for comment, and so the focus should be comments rather than the question and answer, and so it's time for them to get your input.
Okay, I guess that's my comment then. It's a question. Thank you. I have a question that doesn't involve that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Could I just make a brief comment in response to that? Under the Voting Rights Act, we do need to reach out to minority groups and request their input. And I think that was a minority coalition. So that's one of the things that we are doing to satisfy the Voting Rights Act, is reaching out to minority coalitions. But I think it's fair to say we're reaching out to everyone. You know, we've traveled at this point thousands of miles all over the state and invited people on the website to submit their suggestions and maps either individually or as groups. So, you know, we're looking for input from anyone who wants to provide it.
And I believe the coalition maps, anyone that has submitted anything, that is on the website too, that they can view. Is that correct? Okay. Anyone else from the public on this topic? One more? Another? Oh, 2 more. Sorry. Okay.
I'm Steve Nygren, Nygren. I'm in LD 29, and I agree with basically everybody who has talked here that we need as many congressional districts on the border as possible. I also agree that gerrymandering or in attempts to advantage minority populations seems to distort the maps in the geographical areas of community interest. So I look at some of these and I'm saying that, you know, people on the west side of Tucson have nothing to do with Yuma and have no interest in common, except for the fact that somebody is telling us that we can pour a bunch of Hispanics or we can pour a bunch of prison population into supposedly making a competitive district. And again, I agree that someone here is really ledging this panel into the fact that it's like we need to create Democratic or Republican controlled districts. And that happens in natural progression through time. And I'm sorry that if your Hispanic population rolls to Republican, it is because of the lack of leadership that your population is feeling rather than a party problem. So I would like everyone to think about that this weekend, because if you feel your district is non-competitive anymore, it happened because of what the population has experienced in the last 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Betty Bankson, representing Self from Pima.
Thank you. Betty Bankson, B-E-N-G-T-S-O-N, and I live in an unincorporated area of Pima County and LD 26 and CD 8. And I'm not sure, several people have commented on the need for 3 border districts. Maybe we need 3 and maybe we don't, but the one over along the eastern border, it looks to me like that the people in the northern part of that district would have different concerns perhaps than those on the southern part. I'm not, we wouldn't be in that district, so that's just an aside. If a district is 70 or 80% registration for one party or the other, it's hard for it to be a competitive district, whatever your political concerns are. So it's hard to get organized maybe if there's such a disparity in registration. I just wanted to comment a little bit on CD8, excuse me, the current CD8, which is the district that we live in. And I would very much like to see CD8 retain much of its current geographic appearance. It's a very competitive district at the moment, as evidenced by past election history, and should remain, I think, as intact as possible. We are, I think we share a community of interest. I share a community of interest with people who live in the current CD8. My husband is a uniformed services retiree. We are quite interested in what happens to Davis-Monthan and even Fort Huachuca. So those are areas of interest to us. We also spend a lot of time in Cochise County and other areas in the Wilcox area and so on, hiking and birding in the Chiricahuas, the Huachucas, Klondike in the upper Sulphur Spring Valley, and in the grasslands of Cochise County. We're quite concerned about environmental issues in those areas, including, for example, water use. We're concerned about border security and safety in those areas. We don't want to be out hiking when we don't feel safe. And we feel those are all issues that are affected by voting and political affairs. So hope you'll consider keeping CD8 as intact as it is now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I guess we need to be reminded that the Voting Rights Act is something that we have to abide by. It's not something that we can ignore. And I didn't pass it. It wasn't me. It was before my time. And just remind people that although I'm the only Hispanic here, I represent everyone, white, black, Native American. It doesn't matter where you live. I was here to put in here for a reason, and I intend to do the best job I can in representing everyone. So just thought I'd clarify things, that I'm not here to represent a certain group.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public who wanted to address us on the congressional grid map? What if scenarios? Pete Bankson, representing Self from Pima.
The name is Pete Bankson. It's B-E-N-G-T-S-O-N. I'd like just to second what Betty said, but I'd also like to comment that I really appreciate what the commissioners are doing. It's becoming increasingly clear to me how difficult your job is, and I appreciate the work you're doing. One of the things I think is not quite clear to this audience is that you're following Proposition 106. There are the 2 legally required items of Voting Rights Act and equal population. But then you have the other 4 that are equally important, including competitiveness, following city, town, state boundaries, county boundaries, and communities of interest. I forget what the 4th one is. Compact and contiguous. And that's one that I normally talk about is compact and contiguous city-county boundaries, because I'd like to see as many city-county boundaries used on the borders. Thanks for all of your good work.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public on this agenda item? Okay. The time is 6 p.m. Do we need a break for folks? Okay. We'll take a brief recess of 10 minutes and be back at 6:10. Thanks. Okay, the time is 6:19 p.m. and we'll conclude recess. And we are now past the congressional map and moving into the next agenda item, 5. Just review, discussion, and direction to mapping consultant regarding ideas for possible adjustments to legislative grid map based on constitutional criteria. So moving into legislative, were you able to do anything last night on these?
I was.
Okay.
So we have 2 more to present for legislative, and I guess it's good if we just go through the progression of how these started and what criteria have been used. So I will do that briefly. Initially, the first cut at adjusting the grid maps for legislative districts was to adjust the grid maps in order to accommodate the 9 majority-minority districts that Mr. Adelson identified, in order to emphasize that this was something that could be done different ways. We did it 2 versions of that, 2 options that kind of ran parallel to one another, both attempting to change the grid map and accomplish the same goals, but by doing slightly different lines. That was the first version of these maps. Then it was followed up to adjust them so as not to split any Native American reservation lands if possible. A third version was then created to respect census place boundaries. And then a 4th version, these ones, were created. And I should say I created these off of version number 2. I did adjust some of the boundaries to better reflect census place areas, but they were back to 2. So I guess using our new naming structure, these should have been 3B. The other ones would have been 3A, but right now they're 4. So I apologize for that, but we're going to work, and I'll adopt that system going forward. The criteria specifically for these came from Commissioner McNulty, and they were to move all of the Tohono O'odham Reservation into District Number 3 from District Number 2, and also to clean up the border that runs through Tucson. To move the Pied Tribes into District Number 6, to move the Holbrook and Winslow areas into a district with Flagstaff, and to keep the Prescott and Prescott Valley areas whole and not with Flagstaff. So with that in mind, I will go to first one. So just for everyone following along, these are legislative 9 minority district, option 1, version 4. So I guess I'll start with the first part, which was to move the Tohono O'odham Reservation all into District Number 3. So as you can see, it is now included into district number 3. And then for anyone following in the live stream, I was informed over the break that these are all now available online. Just turn on the county, and I can also turn on census place. And again, the census place in this right now are colored to identify different areas. But what we're, I guess the first criteria was to move this reservation land into this area. All right, going on, the next was to move the Supai and Havasupai tribes into district number 6. So, or into district number 7, I'm sorry. So they are now included with the Navajo and the Hopi into district number 7. So they were in district number 6, now they're in district number 7. So district number 7 does have, I think, a fairly strong Native American population.
Mr. Desmond, see, I view that a little differently than the Hispanic issue where there's no other influence district where those folks can be. So to me, it makes sense to consider having them together in a district where they are where they can elect the candidate of their choice, which isn't going to happen unless they're in that district.
So right now, with that change, district number 7 is 61.36% voting age Native American. So, and I believe that was a criteria for the grid maps that you had asked us to try to include the Supai and Havasupai with the other part in the congressionals too. So that is something we've been attempting to do. Going on from there, the next objective was to move the Holbrook and Winslow areas into the district with Flagstaff, which worked out well when we moved all this area into district number 7 from district number 6. We were then able to accomplish that by extending district 6 into this part of district number 7. So it was effectively a swap. So district number 7 took the Pi tribes, and district number 6 got Holbrook and Winslow. So I'll zoom into that. So Winslow was good, and then Holbrook I also, in order to make up that population difference, did include Sun Valley and Joseph City and some other incorporated areas east of there to the Apache County line.
What's the color scheme? Are those population differences in census places, or?
That is just census places uniquely colored.
Okay.
To identify them a little easier.
Okay.
I could turn that off if it's.
No, I like it. I want to know how to do it.
It's not hard. I can show you right
you can
after.
show me later. Okay.
Yeah.
What's that? What's got the line through it there?
Woodruff.
Okay, well, maybe we should, fix Woodruff.
Yeah, that's some little little tweaks. I should be clear here, and because I did this version before yesterday's meeting, I didn't pay as much attention to respecting these census place lines. Version number 2 I did this morning and last night, and since we talked about that more yesterday, version number 2 does take into account trying to not split those as much, and we'll see that in a minute. But I'd be more than happy to go through and make some of those changes.
We'll be working on these a lot, so
yeah,
there's time for that.
But just, it's a good example. So if you look down here, this is the type of split that was fairly common in all these until it was addressed. So when you're not paying attention to census place, it's easy to make the splits because there's lines that run through them reflecting population centers and stuff. So it's just one of the many things we look at when we're doing these, and we have been continually improving upon that. So the last part, the last criteria, was to keep the Prescott and Prescott Valley areas whole, and not with Flagstaff. So if you'll notice, district number 14, and this wasn't a very hard thing to accomplish. Most of Prescott was already in District 14, and just parts of the outer line, Prescott Valley, needed to be moved over. Prescott Valley does have a very interesting border. I'll highlight it real quick. So it's a little hard to see, but it does extend like a border going way out, surrounding unincorporated areas. So there is no way of keeping Prescott Valley whole without including all those areas that are unincorporated in between it. So those were the 4 criteria there. Are there other things you wanted me to look on this, or should I go straight to the second one?
There's another one of these that you did the same thing to?
Yes, because we have the 2 parallel.
Okay, I'm not sure I have both.
You should.
Option 1, version 4, and I have option 2, version 3. Okay, I'll just share. I'm going to want to study that whole Tucson, that little finger that sticks up. Actually, there is one thing I'd like to look at on this. If you go back down to Tucson, actually to Santa Cruz County. I don't know what layer this requires or if it requires Google Earth, but I'd like to know where the Santa Cruz River is and whether that line is on the river or incorporates both sides of the river.
You have to correct me where the river is. It runs through Santa Cruz?
It runs from those, south boundary, kind of right down the middle of Santa Cruz County. And my guess is that line may be on the river. What's the best way to figure that out? Just look at, I could just, yeah, can you look at Tubac or Tumacacri or Green Valley or? That Green Valley right there?
That's Green Valley, the light green or yellowish area.
Okay.
I'm not seeing the river.
Well, the river's just east of Green Valley. What's the pink thing below Green Valley?
It's Elephant Head.
Okay, so the river runs between Elephant Head and Green Valley.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's there's I-19.
Yeah, and the river kind of runs along I-19 to the a little bit east of it.
I mean, I think this. I think that's the river. I don't know why it's not showing up on the river. That thing. Let me just check statewide for a second. See if any of them.
This may take a little more work than we want to force everyone to sit through here, but what I have in my mind is that's really our own little river district. I mean, that's really, you know, the people that live along that area have very common interests, and so I want to look at and think about incorporating that in that legislative district, and I think it's probably not just one side of the river, but both sides of the river along certain of its reaches, or maybe the whole thing, so.
Okay.
Maybe you can be thinking about, you know, finding it, and I'll do the same thing over the weekend.
And what's?
It's called the Santa Cruz River.
I'll try to have that.
Yeah,
available.
it runs from Nogales north, and you know, we wouldn't follow its whole length, but just to a point south of Tucson.
Okay.
You know, there are a lot of ranching, farming communities, arts communities, common interests there, and I think we don't want to be splitting it up like that.
Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is the river layer, and now you can see there's a many of them. So I assume it's this kind of central central artery that they all run into. So it is available. I'll play around this weekend with trying to make it not quite so expensive, just to kind of get the main parts. But we'll have that for Monday.
And if you look at Google Earth, you'll be able to see the channel. It'll be very visible.
Okay.
It
Great.
actually has water in it, or effluent, or a combination. Liquid. Liquid.
Are there other areas of this map you wanted to look at, or should we look at the
I'd like you to do one more what if on a different iteration, and I'm not sure which map to do it off of. Maybe I don't think I care which one, and this is kind of out there, but I just want to see it. I want to draw a legislative district, and you're going to have to look at roads, from Ina Road at the north Campbell at the east. Start from that point, come southeast, you know, and fill in 213,000 people, or whatever the number is. And do it a couple different ways. Coming south, you know, finding it going in a more southerly direction, and then finding it going in a more easterly direction.
Okay.
I'm just curious, and that should be a completely separate, you could call that, you know, Linda's weird what if map.
Okay. I will, I'll draw that. And could you just spell Ina Road, just so I make sure?
INA.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Ina. And, okay. I will, do that. Anything else to look at on this one, or should I go to the other one?
And I should add, it'll be the Ina Road alignment, but it'll probably be like Sunrise.
The road, the names change.
Yeah, what is the name of that? Do you know what I mean? I think it's Sunrise Road. It'll be
Yeah, Ina, Sunrise, Skyline.
Ina Sunrise. Okay.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Again, picking whatever iteration that you like, I'd like to see where we've got cities, again, contained. I'm not sure which one you'd want to start with. I mean, I think that you've begun here. And getting, as it pertains to the northern part of, we've heard a lot of testimony wanting to keep Oro Valley, Marana, and Saddlebrook combined. So I'd like to start getting those together and start getting those together now so that we don't have to wait down the road. We've heard and seen an enormous amount of testimony regarding that. Okay. I'd like to start getting Saddlebrook into the Oro Valley connected.
So Saddlebrook, Oro Valley, and one other one?
Saddlebrook and Oro Valley.
Okay.
Saddlebrook, probably it's, what number is that where you've got Saddlebrook, Oro Valley, Casas Adobes?
So Saddlebrook is
that currently
an 11 right here?
Getting not splitting Oro Valley in half.
Okay. That might be a good time to look at the other one. I think I did take that into account more with this other one. Let me just open that really quick. Take a look. Version, option 2, version 4. It's what if legislative 9 minority districts, option 2, version 4. I don't think, this one hasn't been presented, so it wasn't available as a handout yet. It's available on the website, but it's not available. So in this version, Oro Valley is not split, but it's not with Saddlebrook. So I will. You'll notice if we look at this one a little more. I did attempt to keep some of the census places more whole in this particular version. I apologize that wasn't taken into account more in the last one. It was more just that this one was made after yesterday's meeting where it was kind of re-emphasized, but that was something to look at. So,
Mr. Sturts?
Willie, am I correct then that for looking at, as we're doing our homework over the weekend, and the general public wants to be looking at option 2, version 4, in regards to contiguousness of property, or of communities, correct?
Yes, and also.
That's further along in development.
Yeah, so, but I would say that version 3 of both option 1 and 2 did pay attention more to whole census places, and that version 4 was built off of version number 2. so
Okay,
so
back
if
up,
you look
please.
at version 3, those did pay
Option.
attention. Option 1 and 2, version 3, did attempt to pay attention to not splitting census places.
Okay.
Option 4 was not, what I'm trying to say is option 4 did not, they're not built off of, 1 does not necessarily evolve into 2, into 3, into 4. So it split at 2. So one split went from 2 to 3, and one split went from 2 to 4. Going forward, I'll do those splits as 3A and 3B, but currently that has not been the case.
Thank you. But in both options, 1 and 2 versions 3 and 4, they all reflect the 9 minority districts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that has remained constant. And, you know, feel free to direct me however you like, but if it makes things simpler, we could do a third track that might kind of combine the two, or be more universal. I'm just trying, for simplicity's sake, these two are similar, but there are some differences.
What was the split again from 2 to 4?
So 4 was the changes you had asked for.
Okay.
On 2.
Yes.
3 was the changes the other commissioners had asked for on 2.
Okay, so we have, all right, okay. Maybe we should rename them.
Yeah,
Why don't we?
Why don't we call these 3B?
Okay, 3, that
Right.
might be the thing to do.
So here forward, option 4 will be 3B, and option 3 will be 3A.
Okay. And then let's do an option 3C with the, with the thing I just asked you to do with the Catalina, the Campbellina.
Okay.
Let's do that as a separate.
All right, so that one will also be based off of option 2 then, which is.
You can base it off 4, the one that you just made my changes on.
All right, so that'll be 4B then.
Okay, we'll leave it to you.
Okay, thanks.
Just put, start putting notes on them, what the date is and what the major change is. I guess I'm still concerned that we haven't received the block equivalency files yet on that Arizona Minority Coalition's.
No.
Okay, I think we're going to have to reach out to them because I'm a little concerned that we can't get down into the nitty-gritty of these legislative districts without, we really do want the input from the minority community, given that we know that they are going to be providing it.
Okay.
Mr. Bladine, do you have information on that? You don't have to run.
We have had several contacts last week about trying to get that information from them. And I know Christina called them, I believe, yesterday, and we don't have it, but we will keep talking to them. And I understand it's starting to get into a place where it's a problem for us. But I guess if we don't think they're going to get it in a timely fashion, we can talk to Strategic about other alternatives. But we'll follow up again on Monday.
Okay. And then, Mary, are you looking at the voting rights analysis of these districts now?
Yes, Madam Chair, members, and working with Strategic and Bruce and everyone, we are starting to look at the voting rights analysis closer. And one of the questions is our number of benchmarks, frankly. Historically, as Bruce described, when DOJ did the pre-clearance 9 years ago, that they concluded that there were 9 districts where there was an opportunity to elect. There are more than 9 districts where, in fact, a minority candidate has been elected, and we're looking at that analysis to see who, is there a candidate of choice that the minority community that is actually being elected there, just what's going on at a closer level in terms of where the opportunity to elect is occurring. There are some districts in Arizona that don't require a majority-minority to elect minority candidates. And the example that comes up with that historically, like District 23 from the last decade had a history of electing without a majority-minority, and some other districts as well. So we were thinking, just in terms of without having drilled down, that there may actually be 10 benchmarks, not majority-minority, but paying attention to districts where there's an opportunity to elect. And I've been, as we're going through this, trying to kind of match up numbers with districts, because what I see, and again, this is very quick, and there might be others who've seen more, it seems like more of a concentration of the minority numbers that we might be able to spread out a bit more to make sure that there's, that we preserve the opportunity to elect in some of those that have a, not a true majority-minority, but have a significant population, and when you look at the voting analysis, they did have the opportunity to elect. So I just wanted to note that, and I was trying to figure out an instruction that would help maybe get to that issue in crafting the maps, but I haven't gotten there as I'm sitting here, if I do. But I think that's generally it, if there was a way of spreading things out a bit more. And also how it's easy on the congressional districts to match up. You kind of know generally the vicinity of where the minority districts are now. And in terms of legislative districts, we all know that there's the Northern Arizona Native American District. There are 2 in Maricopa County where they elect all minority candidates, all 3, all the time. There are 2 others where they have pretty consistently elected 1 of the 3 minority candidates. So looking in terms of whether there's an opportunity to elect there. In Pima County, there's 1 that tends to always elect, and there's another one that tends to elect a mix, again, trying to look at the opportunity to elect. And we have 3 rural districts that have elected minority candidates fairly consistently, southeastern Arizona, southwestern Arizona, and in the Pinal County area. And so trying to match those up with how those areas would perform here, and whether we just have 9 that have an opportunity to elect, or are there still some more where there might be an opportunity to elect. And that's the analysis that we're doing, and Ken's doing, with input from the lawyers. And that's the kind of thing that DOJ will ultimately look at, in terms of the opportunity to elect the preferred candidate of choice.
Could we would it be helpful to take the HVAP density map that you're going to do and overlay that with our existing legislative districts and then maybe with our grids? Can we, I know we have to start with the grid, we can't start with our existing legislative districts, but would it help us at least to conceptualize it if we did that?
Perhaps. I was even looking at, there are, how many districts we have when you look at because some of ours are coalition districts now. And so just some of them have like 70% plus minority population, and comparing how many we have in that range compared to the current range, and how many of them we have in the 60 to 69, and make sure we kind of group them within the same range. And maybe that would, if they can still get to the overall population they need, maybe that's a way to approach it. But again, if the overlay helps as well.
I'm just a visual person.
We could.
I don't know if that helps or not. We can let you guys let the lawyers
I can make any reference maps that you want. So that's not hard.
Okay, any other legislative thoughts? Legislative district thoughts, I should say. you have enough work for the rest of the weekend, I take it,
I've got
Willie?
plenty of congressional. Are there any other legislative what-ifs you'd like to see?
There's the one Ms. McNulty mentioned.
And, I mean, there's also the what-ifs that we covered yesterday that you'll be working on, is that correct?
The legislative what-ifs?
The one based on the congressional river district version?
That's right.
Okay.
So just to re-clarify that, I guess, what you'd like to see is as many districts that kind of follow that one.
That is correct.
District as
I
possible.
think we said 5 with the changes that I proposed today.
Okay. Yeah, that's on my list also.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you for all your work. Appreciate it. The next item on the agenda we covered previously, the number 6, so we go to number 7, discussion and possible action on retaining a voting analysis expert to review, analyze, and recommend action on voting rights issues, including polarized voting, and conduct analysis regarding competitiveness and other state constitutional criteria as needed. And I believe our legal counsel was going to be doing some research at our direction on this topic.
And hopefully we'll have this is on the agenda for Monday too, so we're hoping to have a more complete report Monday. So I don't really have an update that's ready for the commission today.
Okay. So, any other? No cheering. The next item is the executive director's report, which we had to miss yesterday, but it was on our agenda for today. So, Mr. Bladeen?
Actually, I think we'll be rather short too. Christina, I've asked her to just give you a quick update. She's been working hard this week on round 2, and also an update on, she's also been working with Strategic on getting mapping going, so I thought I'd let her talk about that, Map It Online going.
Willie, did you have a chance to go over that since I missed the first 20 minutes of the meeting?
Yes, Maptitude Online is up and running.
Okay.
It's on the website now. I believe we'll be conducting a short training during Monday's meeting for members of the public.
And I spoke with Andrew yesterday, and he said that Brad and Buck were working on finding a home on the website for this link for the public. So that should be up soon. And also, as far as the second round of public hearings, we are exploring the idea of having simultaneous meetings on the same night. So we're looking into our options of how we will record these meetings. So we should have an update for you next week. I believe that's it.
You've made some contacts with cities in ASU.
That's right, thank you. And I've contacted ASU. I have a meeting with them next week as far as video conferencing some meetings for us. And yes, they actually use a webinar system. So we're looking into that as well. And we are also, I'm sorry.
I can't remember. Let's see. We talked about, and you've talked to some cities too.
Oh, yes. And I've also spoken to some cities about meeting locations as well. And I have to say that they've been very helpful and in hosting us. So we are working out those details as well. So
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, have you just spoken to representatives from Northern Arizona University? They have campuses pretty much everywhere throughout the state, and they're pretty advanced with the technology that they use.
Right.
So
I've actually called them. I called them prior to the first round of public hearings because in 2001 we actually utilized their satellite system in video conferencing. And what happened was, yes, they had the latest and greatest in technology. However, with the budget cuts, so did their that component of their department as well. So
So that, just to confirm, that's not an option? And
that's not an option
Okay.
right now. And then I've also spoken to community colleges as well, and the problem that we're running into right now is class has started already. So
What about Rio Salado? Rio Salado uses a lot of technology. They don't really have a lot of in-person classes, but they do still have that technology. Have you spoken to them?
no, I haven't, but I can check with them next week.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
In following up on Commissioner Herrera's thought, there are universities that have got campuses, and for example, both in Flagstaff and Yuma, in Phoenix and Tucson. Have you pursued having simulcasts or webinars where you're able to have two presentations simultaneously using their
So when I spoke with ASU, they said that they would go ahead and make those contacts with the other community colleges and universities to see what options they have as well. So.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
One last recommendation, consider pursuing, we're speaking to the University of Phoenix, Apollo Group. And I know it's a private sector university, but they, I guess out of all universities, they're the ones that they're pretty advanced with the technology, and I'd recommend you contacting them. If you don't have any contacts there, I'm happy to help you out.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the executive director report? Mr. Sturts?
There was a distribution of a draft budget update. When will that be ready for presentation?
I have gotten a more detailed document yesterday, and I thought what I'd do is send it out to you over the weekend. It has the backup detail to that, so you can look at it. If that gives you the detail you want, then we could put it on the website or do whatever you'd like to do with it. But it is in much more detail and is complete through the end of August.
Perfect. And that'll be ready for our review this weekend and your presentation on Monday to be posted, or are you thinking that you're just going to go ahead and post?
That's a good question. I was going to send it out to you and then let you kind of decide whether you want me to post it or bring it to a meeting, whatever you'd like me to do. I believe I have it in an electronic file that I got just before I left, and if I do, I can certainly send it out to you all the weekend. I think that's what I can do and was planning on it. Otherwise, first thing Monday. And I can put for later, I don't remember that I have budget on director's report for Monday, but I can put it on for like Thursday, one of the other days we're meeting.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Would it be prudent to post the budget and then put it on the executive director's report so that we can have commentary and Q&A about it on Thursday? And allowing the public to, if there was any questions that they may have.
Well, with maps, we've kind of taken the approach that we'd like to discuss them first before we post them on our website, but I don't know, how do others feel about our budget
Madam Chair?
draft?
I would take the same approach with the budget,
Mhm.
making sure that we look at it first before it goes out in public.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay.
Then I will get it out to you as soon as I can, and if I have an electronic file, it'll be this weekend.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do you mind staying up for the next item on the agenda too, which is the discussion of future meetings? Because
No,
I want
that-
to make sure we have the right dates.
Okay. Yep, one more thing.
Sure.
Sorry, Buck just informed me that the link for online mapping is on our website right now. It's under the maps link, and it's called online mapping.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't have in front of me what we had talked about, but my only knowledge of changes of the meetings we've set up, I think we have one time where Commissioner Herrera on the 14th will have to participate during Skype, if I remember it right. But I think that's the only change that I'm aware of since we developed the schedule that you all have.
Okay, so our next meeting is the 12th, Monday,
Correct.
at 9 a.m. in Casa Grande,
Correct?
and we go all day. Is that
Yes, we do.
Okay.
it's a long day. I think we scheduled that one till potentially 9 o'clock, and I don't remember the start time from the top of my head.
12 hours, okay.
Yeah.
That's
That works.
ridiculous.
I want to see you all do this. I'll be sleeping in a cot in the back, but.
Okay, and then the next meeting.
I'm sorry, it starts at 9 a.m. on the 12th. And so I don't know that we did that. I think it's the ones that were like 2 o'clock. You told us to put it till 9 or later in the evening. So I don't know that we did that one. And I'm sorry, I didn't bring my schedule.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
There seems to be a lot of, well, I've been noticing that a lot of the items that have been in previous meetings, whether it be yesterday or even today, have been moved to Monday. So I suspect that Monday's meeting is going to be a long meeting. And I not that I enjoy long meetings, but I prefer to get it over with, and that as opposed to making 2 days that are long, one long day. So let's all come prepared with our snacks and water.
Okay. So we'll meet the Monday. Then
Monday.
the next meeting is?
The 14th.
And that's in?
Casa Grande, and also 9 o'clock.
9 a.m.,
And
okay.
then the 15th is at the Heard Museum with the Intertribal Council, and also a and a mapping meeting for you. Potentially, I believe we could start at 12, and I think that works with everybody's calendars. Then we could have the tribal leaders come in somewhere around 1:30. They have an earlier meeting. Have that item on the agenda, so we could do some mapping if you wish, from 12 to like 1:30. Have about an hour to meet with them, and then we could go back to mapping, and I believe we can be there till 5, and I'm trying to see if we can be there a little longer than that. And that would be at the Heard Museum.
Okay. And are we holding the 16th as well?
Yes, we are, and that would be whether you want me to continue to hold that or not, but we do have it on a hold.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
That same day that we're meeting with the tribal leaders, which is on Thursday the 16th?
Right.
That's scheduled for
Thursday the 15th.
I'm sorry, Thursday the 15th. It's scheduled from 1 to 5, which seems like a really short meeting. And I know you had mentioned, because we have availability to stay later if we have to?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Herrera, I will check. The last time I talked to them, that the Intertribal Council who uses the facility has never gone past 5. They weren't sure whether we could, but I can certainly see if we can't do that. And they're being nice enough to get us their rate, which is about more than half of the going rate. But and if we can't do there, we could have another location that you could go to after 5. But I will try to see if we could go to at least 7 maybe.
That'll be our third, would that be our third hearing next week? And then we're holding up on the 16th also?
So then, well, how about not meet on the 16th if we have a long meeting on the 15th?
Yeah, but I like the idea. I mean, we have to give direction to our mapping consultant too, and so sometimes it doesn't make sense to go 8 hours because there's only so much we can do because we need to get the maps. So I'd rather do the noon to 5 thing at the Heard Museum.
15th.
And then let's all hold the 16th in case we need a half-day meeting that day.
And I don't think we had a start time for the 16th. I think we just held that on our schedule.
Is everybody clear the 16th for?
I don't remember a conflict from the top of my head, but we can certainly double check it and let you all know again on Monday if there was a conflict one of you told us about. But I don't remember on the 16th that there was one.
Okay, so let's plan on at least a half-day meeting on the 16th. Because then we'd have 2 half-day meetings in a row, the 15th.
How about time and location?
I'm flexible. You want to do Casa Grande? Morning Casa Grande?
Morning in Phoenix.
Casa Grande?
Morning in Casa Grande, about 9 o'clock.
Is that good? 9 o'clock, everyone? In Casa Grande, Friday
On the
morning?
16th, going once, going twice.
9:30.
9:30?
9:30, going once.
We can do 9:30, is that all right? Okay, 9:30 Casa Grande, Friday, the 16th. And just to clarify, on the 15th, it's starting at noon, Ray?
Or go ahead, unless you'd like, that was my thought. I'd give you potentially an hour to do some mapping or things and then meet with tribal leaders when they come in. And I'm guessing we may not see them exactly at 1:30, so that way you could keep meeting, and then when they are available, we'll make that the agenda item.
Madam Chair?
Great. Mr. Herrera?
Now, can you explain to me the meeting with the tribal leaders? Is that going to be an open meeting like we have with other coalitions that have approached the IRC and they've talked to us in the podium, addressed us? Is that going to be that type of meeting? I guess I'm not understanding what type of meeting it's
Yeah, I think what we planned would be similar to the presentation you had from the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government. I've asked that basically we'd have a mapping presentation from them, and is what it would be, or if not a specific map, then any discussion about goals, objectives they'd like to see. And I've asked if we could get a list of the tribal leaders before we get there who would speak, so we'd be able to kind of organize it and proceed on that fashion. So yes, I'd see it as a public input for them, and then you can go back to your regular mapping type of hearing.
Madam Chair, one more question as a follow-up. What tribes are being represented in this meeting?
I think it's pretty much all of the tribes in Arizona, with perhaps the Navajo being the only exception, but I'll double check that with you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're a member, but they do. There's a liaison there. Do you know, Mary?
Yeah, the Navajo aren't a member of Intertribal Council, but sometimes they do participate. As you say, they might have some liaison for special events.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that for Ray or Christina? Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Any future agenda items, too, that we haven't already discussed that need to be raised, too, now? This is part of agenda item 9 today. Okay. That takes us to, we'll go ahead and skip 10, since we may go into executive session on that one, so that the public can have comment, and then, so we'll just take that out of order. So we'll go to number 11. I have a few request to speak forms, and if anyone's already spoken and they want to speak again, feel free, just raise your hand. My first speaker is Frank Bergen from Tucson. Gone. Barbara Warren, representing Self from Pima. Maddie Erkin, representing Self from Pima. Jerry Ottoboni, representing Rancho Vistosa HOA from Pima.
Yes, hello, my name is Jerry Ottoboni. That's Gerottoboni. Can you hear me okay? I was wondering, with regard to the data that you're using, is that coming from those who voted for Obama / McCain, congressional, Senate seats, or state Senate in the House of Representatives? Which of these are you using for your data? Thank you.
And that's the end of my request to speak forms, unless anybody, okay, there are people who have spoken who want to speak again. Okay, this gentleman, you'll have to remind us your name.
John Vanderbuken.
Thank you, John.
This is my first time to be here at these meetings, and I understand that we have 5 commissioners who are all unpaid volunteers. Is that true? I guess so. And it looks like you have nothing short of a full-time job. So thank you for your service. One other thing is that I've noticed is that Attorney General has ordered deposition, I guess, from all 5 commissioners, and that 2 commissioners have given a deposition to Attorney General. Is there a date when all 5 commissioners will have given their deposition?
Mary?
And this is just the time for comment rather than a question and answer. So go ahead and just give your
Question
input.
is a comment. Thank you.
And other speakers? Lynn St. Angelo?
Thank you. Since Mr. Bladini is going to be giving, I guess, an update on the budget, I was wondering if you would, because all I have is like what was handed out at a meeting on July actuals. I guess he's going to do the August actual figures. It would be nice if this was online so that people who are just observing on the Skyping could actually print out the budget from the budget and the actuals together, so you could see the projection as well. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Betty Bankson?
Betty Bankson, Bengtson. Thank you for listening to me again today. I just had a couple of, one observation. You keep talking about census places, and I assume that these are areas that have been defined by the National Census Bureau. And I'd be interested to know what criteria, how are those defined? And do those definitions really have anything to do with the definitions that you are working with for the redistricting? I have no idea how the Bureau of the Census defines the census place. Is it simply a convenient geographic area, or are there some other criteria? So if someone could speak to that at some point, I would appreciate it. And I'd also like to speak to the issue that was brought up earlier about including Saddlebrook with Oro Valley and Marana. I currently live in, I live in what's currently LD 26. I'm in what is defined as a Catalina Foothills census place. And I get my government services from Pima County. And I feel I have no community of interest with the residents of Saddlebrook. So I feel that I have the greatest community of interest with those people who live in Pima County. And so I'd like to be associated politically with Pima County residents and not Pinal County residents, so that my senator and representatives could address the needs of my county. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a request to speak form from Ralph Kaiser, representing Tucson Tea Party from Pima County.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. My name's Ralph Kaiser. I'm a resident of Pima County, Arizona, and an organizer of the Tucson Tea Party, a group of approximately 4,100 conservative Arizona residents. Among other values, the members of the Tucson Tea Party believe in smaller and more transparent government. Above all, our members expect honesty and truth from our elected and appointed government officials. I'm here tonight to implore all members of this commission to fully cooperate with our state's Attorney General's investigation. We implore the chairwoman to promptly comply with the State Attorney General's written investigative demand for production of documents and examination under oath. And in Mary O'Grady's August 29th letter to Mark Wilson, Mary states that the Commission provided as much information as possible to the public about the procurement process. I'm troubled about the use of the term "as possible." For a matter of such extreme importance as the redistricting, the public should have access to all procurement information. Our members expect that this commission should be fully transparent on all information as it relates to the use of our tax dollars. And if this commission is acting ethically and impartially, there should be no reason to withhold any documents from the public. It's the right and honest thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? A couple more.
Once again, my name is Jack Russa, Roosa. I'm going to echo some of the comments the gentleman just made. Sometimes doing what's right is not necessarily fair, and it's not necessarily easy. So I would urge the members to appear before Attorney General Horn's commission, and let's clean this up as soon as possible and reinstore the faith in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Bowserman?
Christine Bowserman. I want to speak about Lawyer McGrady. When you had the conversation, you were asked about the Voting Rights Act, and you were defining that there are 10, that a Hispanic was voted for, and I was under the impression from the DOJ when he gave his presentation back on the 22nd of August, he specifically stated that the race of the candidate was not a factor. They have to vote as a voting block. But if a group of Hispanics want to vote for a white person, if a group of Indians want to vote for Hispanic, and a group of white people want to vote for Hispanic, it doesn't matter. So I don't think you can, because it kind of got confusing. It was like you were talking about the Voters' Rights Act, and then I know there's been discussion about having competitiveness defined as who is electable. But earlier today, I think it was Commissioner Herrera had stated that was never voted on as being a factor. So it got really, really confusing because, I know we're not supposed to take race. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Cheryl Lamona?
Just one quick comment. I live in Rancho Vistoso. I'm not in Saddlebrook, but I am friends with a number of people that work up there or that live up there, and I work with a number of people from there. And whenever we talk about this redistricting, there's not a single one that I know, although I'm sure there are some, that want to be associated separately from Oro Valley. They all come down to do their shopping and whatever. It's truly a community of interest with Oro Valley, and that's where they want to be. So I just felt the need to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Pete Bankson?
My name is Pete Bankson. That's B-E-N-G-T-S-O-N. I've sort of been following, or I've been coming to these meetings for quite a while, and sort of been following the issue in the paper with the Attorney General's suit, and I believe Mary O'Grady correctly decided that the commission was administrative or legislative body and didn't need to comply, and so I support you in your decision on that way. I'd also like to point out that one area, one of the goals that doesn't get spoken about a lot is following county boundaries. I'm in LD 26, Catalina Foothills, as you probably learned from Betty, and I wanted to add that there's a Pima County boundary, Pinell County boundary that cuts LD 26. And I believe that the Saddlebrook folks vote for county officers, and they should stay in Pinell County and give us a separate legislative district in Pima County. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Okay. That concludes public comment then, and takes us to agenda item 10, report legal advice and direction to council regarding Attorney General inquiry and related litigation, including discussion and possible action regarding expenditures for legal representation. The commission may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for the purpose of obtaining legal advice and providing direction to council. So is there anything first that you wanted to cover? Okay.
Madam Chair, I vote that we go into executive session to discuss the issue with the AG and the investigation.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the time is 7:23. That concludes public session, and we'll enter executive session once we can clear out the room. So we'll take a 5-minute recess.
Named in the action brought this week by the Arizona Attorney General, based on the advice of counsel.
I second that.
Any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman?
I'm a little tired, and I want to make, I know I've said some things when this investigation began, but I'm struggling to remember whether it was in public session or not, so I'm going to be very careful. I'm certainly, I really regret that this situation has arisen. Don't think it's been easy for me. I respect the three of your positions. I hope you respect my position and my thinking of what was in the best interest of the commission. I certainly don't want to see any of you have any stress about it or any financial hardship. I'm not going to oppose this motion, but I'm not going to vote in favor of it either. I'm going to abstain on this.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I will add that I don't understand your position. I honestly don't. I know I've done nothing wrong here other than try and serve my state. I know that one day the story of this whole thing will be told. I don't know when it will be, but I know that that's how these things work, and it will be told. And it won't just be a storyline that's been manufactured to try and derail this commission. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue to do everything I can to uphold the oath that I took to draw fair and impartial districts for the state. And I like you both, I respect you both, but I honestly don't understand your position.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Abstain.
So we have 3 ayes and 2 abstentions from Freeman and Sturts. And with that, is anything else? The time is 7:50 p.m. and we will adjourn.